In every Saab, you'll find durable construction, like Volvo's. The luxury of a spacious interior, like Audi's. Gas economy, like Dasher's. The performance of an overhead cam engine, like BMW's. Comfortable reclining seats, like Peugeot's. The safety of four-wheel disc brakes, like Mercedes-Benz. All the things you look for in a car, you'll find in every Saab. Saab, it's what a car should be.
Welcome to the Saab in the Rearview Mirror podcast. I'm your host, John Christensen. This podcast is a celebration of all things Saab from the perspective of ex-Saab corporate employees who witness the day-to-day operations of one of the best company environments in the automotive business. It is an insider's look at the mostly good times at Saab, shared through the stories of those that live them. My time at Saab started in December 1984 and lasted just shy of 39 years, with my retirement in October 2023. It was a great run, and I look back with fond and fun memories, as do most of my fellow ex-Saabis, who I will be chatting with in the weeks and months ahead. Thank you for joining me on this road trip as we look in the rearview mirror at Saab. This podcast supports SaabParts.com and SaabGear.com, the exclusive supplier of Saab original parts and Saab branded swag. Even though Saab cars are no longer made, there are still 1 million Saabs on the road all over the world. Here in North America, the Saab legacy lives on to ensure you can access the parts and expertise to ensure a long and happy life for your Saab. Hi, and welcome to another edition of the Saab in the Rearview Mirror podcast. My name is John Christensen, and this week I am joined by long-term Saab employee Arsey Miller, who started with Saab in 1974 and ended in 1992. Welcome, Arsey.
Thank you, John. Good to be here.
We were talking a little bit before that we started recording, and it sounds like Arsey is the Saab archivist. He has so much documentation, which I'm dying to get my eyes on, so we will add that to the video later. Arsey sent me an email with all the different titles. I'm just going to touch on all of them briefly, and then we'll talk about them in more detail. But you said you started as the Central Region Warehouse Manager, then you were a Parts Manager in the Central Region, a District Service Manager, a District Sales Manager, then you had another location for District Sales Manager, and a Regional Sales Operation Manager, the National Product Display and Sales Training Manager, and you also ran the Saab National Peace Officer Ski Race, which I remember from the photos, worked all the Saab owners events, developed some of the historical vehicles, training workshops for IDS salespeople, and I don't know, you worked a little bit for Scania Bus and the friction tester.
Yeah.
And as you said, that was all on the second day.
Yeah,
So,
exactly.
interesting. But if we go back way to I have the one burning question that the world wants to know is your first name. Is that a play on RC, the letters, or how did that come to be? And you've probably been asked that a million times, but
Yeah,
I'm
I get a
asking
lot.
you again here.
I get a lot of different variations. So the most common one is R period C period, because a lot of people call me and say, "Oh, I know an RC," and it turns out they were like Robert Charles or something like that. I actually was named after a man that my dad was in the Philippines with at the end of the Second World War. His name was Arsey Womack, and he was from McMinnville, Tennessee. It's Arsey. And he's the only one I have verified that has had the name. I mean, he's gone now, so I guess tag you're it. But
Yeah.
it was challenging in a lot of respects. I mean, growing up, I was RC Cola and all those kind of things.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
But the most challenging thing was, particularly because I spent pretty much most of my career with Saab in or around the dealerships. And having a unique name kind of sticks with people. And then there's the 4,000 people it stuck with. So even today, I mean, it could be my next door neighbor I've known for 20 years, and I very seldom address people by their first name because I might have 1 out of 5. So, but yeah, it's stuck with me. Nowadays, it's all kinds of, the weirder the name, the better. But back when I was in grade school and middle school, high school, it was pretty hard having a name that was, let's just say, unique.
Yeah. I can sympathize because although it's not my name, but it's my size. I was known since the seventh grade as Big John. It's like,
Right,
oh, I
right.
know him. I know Big John.
Yeah,
So it's the same
exactly.
kind of thing. They know the face or the name sticks out.
Yeah, we'll
Um,
get to it at some point, maybe. But there was a woman that worked for Saab
mhm.
by the name of Delia Bernardi, which is also a very odd name. I don't know whether you knew Delia or not, but
Vaguely
yeah,
remember the name.
yeah. So we actually got married in '88, and our
Oh,
kids are named normal names. So her and I are weird names, but the kids are just regular old kid names.
oh, that's
So
funny.
yeah,
Well, yeah, my mom was three kids, John, Janice, and Jeff. Loved the letter
yeah,
J, I guess.
yeah.
Who knows? Well, going back to the very beginning, where were you born? Where did you grow up?
I was born in a little town south of Fort Wayne, Indiana, Decatur, Indiana. So I'm a Hoosier.
Okay.
Lived there till I was about 7. My dad his whole family were farmers. He worked for the agriculture division for Kraft Foods. Took a job with them when I was 7, and we moved to Indianapolis and actually lived on Tibbs, which is the backside of turn 3 for the 500. Now
Wow.
my grade school was on the backside of turn 2,
Hmm.
so for the month of May I learned nothing in school other than how to recognize different pipes on Offenhauser Roadster engines. And and quite often the race teams at that point were a station wagon with a two-wheel trailer behind it and kiss the wall. And generally, sometime during the day, they'd drive by with this wrecked Curtis Roadster on the trailer heading for wherever their shop was.
Hmm.
So it was an interesting place to grow up. I was just there actually a couple of weeks ago, so it was fun.
Yeah, I took the tour there once. That was about it, and
Yeah,
was just
yeah,
flabbergasted by the steepness of the banks and the
yeah,
turns,
yeah.
especially when you're riding around a school bus or something.
Right, right, right. Yeah.
Now, so is that what led to your interest in mechanics, automotive?
I, it's hard to say. My dad being from a farm family, they were all mechanical.
Yeah. Yeah.
So my dad always had something going on, tearing apart this or tearing apart that or doing this or painting that. So I'm amazed as I got older how much I learned trying not to learn anything.
Hmm.
So, but I was never an athlete. It just didn't interest me at all. I turned wrenches. I mean, when my buddies were playing basketball or football or baseball or whatever, I was doing something. I think the first big project I ever did was swapped an engine out of a wrecked Royal Enfield into a Royal Enfield frame I found somewhere else for a buddy of mine, and just always been a gearhead.
Did you have formal training or just all self-taught?
When I was in probably from the third grade or so, if I were in the third grade now, I'd have been diagnosed with dyslexia.
Hmm.
But in what that would have been third grade, somewhere in the middle 50s, you were either lazy or stupid or a little of both. So that was my fate in most of school. But I was good at math and I did well at the creative shop. So I was an art student and drafting and auto shop. I think I took auto shop all 4 years. Had a great auto shop teacher by the name of Al Lowe, and he had a good relationship. We were in Villa Park, which was Chrysler had a big warehouse in North Lake, which wasn't far away. So he had a great relationship, and we always had new Chrysler, new Plymouths, new Dodges. I think when I was a freshman, we actually had one of the turbine cars in the auto shop to kind of look under and have it up on the lift and that kind of stuff. So I suppose that was my formal training. You know,
Hmm.
through senior year, I was in the Plymouth troubleshooting contest. So that was the training. And then after that, I worked at a full service gas station, and we had a news agency account, and they had essentially CJ5s and 6s. So every day I was pulling an engine, pulling a gearbox, pulling a clutch, changing the shims and the front axles to get rid of the death wobble. So that was pretty much my formal training.
Hmm. Hmm. I always joke with people, well, my dad was a shade tree mechanic, and my training was, give me a 9/16. There you go. And that was about
Hmm.
it.
Hmm.
So you got out of school there in Indiana. Where did you go next?
Well, actually, when I was 11, we moved from Indianapolis to the Chicago suburbs.
Oh, okay.
So I lived in the western suburbs, which is, if I had to say, where did you grow up? I'd say Villa Park, Illinois, which is a western
Hmm.
suburb. So I was
Okay.
there up until the time I went to Connecticut as the
Hmm.
National Sales Training and Product Display Manager. So that would have been my mid 30s.
Yeah. Pretty flat land out there,
Yeah,
western
yeah,
west of
yeah,
Chicago. I know. Been there
absolutely.
once or twice. So, what jobs did you do before sub?
Well, like I said, I dabbled in community college. Again, being dyslexic, it was challenging for me.
Yeah.
So 1969 came along, and they brought out this thing called the lottery for the draft, and I was number 16.
Oh, wow.
So January 1st or January 3rd, I guess it was, of 1970, I was drafted and went to the Army, spent a couple of months in basic and AIT. And the whole time I was there, they kept saying, if you join for another year, we'll send you to OCS, blah, blah, blah. And I said, hey, you got 2 years. You can make me a five-star general, but you got 2 years. And
Hmm.
so finally, I was at Fort Polk, Louisiana, which when you pull in, the gate says birthplace of combat infantrymen for Vietnam. So you pretty much get an understanding of where your life's heading.
Yeah.
And they said, all right, how about NCO school? And I said, 2 years? Yeah, 2 years. So I went to NCO school at Fort Benning, and that exhausted 1 year of my 2 year draft. The end of that year, January of 71, I went to Vietnam and was in the far north, which was luckily in most respects, because when I landed in Vietnam, the worst place to be by the rumor mill was a place called Phu Bai, which is way up north. It was where the 101st Airborne was, and they had the last couple of years in some pretty extensive battles and situations. So I was with 12 guys or 11 guys throughout the whole time. I mean, from day
Hmm.
one till we graduated from NCO school. And we got to Vietnam, and the first day, 11 of them were called and went to the 1st Cav. And I stayed 3 more days and went to the 101st Airborne. And in retrospect, it was the best place to be because they didn't use any Agent Orange up there. The foliage was too heavy. It was trees that you and I both couldn't put our arms around.
Hmm.
So in that respect, it was the best place to be. But I served a year. I was a combat mortarman. I worked in the reconnaissance, worked a forward observer, on the line, fire bases, observation posts. Spent a lot of time in getting in and out of Hueys. So we got a couple of air medals. So yeah,
Wow.
it was interesting. I learned a lot about life. I learned a lot about how little you could live on. Learned a lot about how fragile it was,
Hmm.
and came home. And as many soldiers of that time, the brass bands weren't playing, and life was different. And I went back to work. I was working at Greyhound Van Lines, and I don't know. One night somebody said something about my hair and my face hair. I've always been kind of a long hair with a beard, and I said, well, I just spent a year in the jungle. I don't need this shit. So
Hmm.
I got in a truck and went to California and lived off of kind ladies that would feed me and breed me for 6 months, and
Hmm.
finally decided I better straighten out or things were going to be. It's a great way to live, but wasn't
Yeah.
forever. So
Wow.
came back, went to work for Haynes Hosiery, running their warehouse, and had a manager that one of the guys that takes credit for everything.
Sure.
He does everything, no matter who does it. And we had a big project, and I brought some innovative things to it, and I heard him taking credit. So this big project, I took him all the way to the end of the plank, and then I said, you know what? You're so good at this. I think I'll just leave and you can handle it from here. So at that point, employment agencies were how you found work, how you found jobs,
Yeah.
or through local newspapers and that. So I went to an employment agency and I'd been running a warehouse for Haynes, and this young lady said, we have a opportunity at Saab. And I said, Saab? You mean those funny little cars that have airplanes on the mud flaps? I said, I'm a GTO Hemi guy. I'm not going to ride around something that blows smoke rings out of the tailpipe, you know. I mean, let's get real. And she whined, and so I said, all right, well, I'll go on the interview. So I went on the interview. I think Edma TV, and I've been trying for 2 days to try to remember the guy from Parts name. And I didn't want the job. I mean, I absolutely didn't want the job. So everything they said, I'd up the ante. And they'd say, okay. And so finally, I get to a point and I say, let's back up and write some of this stuff down, because, hey, I wasn't working, and while I was looking for something else, it wasn't a bad deal. So I agreed to go to work with them. I'd only left Haynes a couple days before, and I said, all right, how about if I start like next Monday? This was like on a Wednesday.
Were you still in California? Or
no, this was in Chicago at the Central Region.
Back to Chicago.
Yeah,
okay.
yeah. I was only in California for about 6 months.
Okay.
This was a Central Region, and they said, well, we'd like you to start tomorrow. And I said, tomorrow? I said, how about Monday? And they said, well, we really need you to start tomorrow. And I said, well, okay, whatever. I met John Savickas, who was the regional manager. So I go in the next day, and I'm there at like 8 o'clock, and I go to the warehouse, and there's about 3 of these tractor printers just spitting out stuff. You probably weren't around when they had the first where you'd peel little tags off and
I remember those. Oh yeah,
put them on the parts or on the parts bags and that kind of stuff.
And dealers would complain because people put them right over the description of the parts.
Yeah,
you couldn't have them on the shelf. You couldn't display them.
So there were stacks of papers this high on the floor. I'm standing there 8:30. I don't even know how to turn the lights on. Nobody's coming in. So I go up to the front office and I said, what time do the guys start in the warehouse? Oh, well, see, what happened was that the guy you're replacing took a job at Volkswagen, and all the warehouse guys were related to him. And so he said, well, go tell Savickas that you need a raise or else you're going to quit, and I'll hire you at Volkswagen. John obviously said no, and they all left. So I'm in this warehouse. I have no idea what's going on. Never been in it before in my life. And I like to think I'm a pretty quick thinker, and I just didn't think fast enough and just walk out the door. That would have been the easy solution. So I said, all right. So I start to figure it out, and a little later he comes in and he says, well, we've got a temporary fix. And I said, okay. So for about 3 months until I could build up a warehouse team, I used to get a bus from Cook County Jail of day release prisoners.
Oh, my.
And they'd let them off at the front door. They'd walk them into the building, and they'd come back at 4:30 and pick them up.
Wow.
And some of them were okay. And one guy, he didn't do anything. He'd be in the restroom, and he'd come out for 5 minutes, and then he'd be in the restroom. And I finally went in and said, we're kind of here to work. And he says, I'm up for murder, and I really don't much care. I said, hey, enjoy your day. Enjoy your day. Whatever you want to do, perfect.
How did you come up with that idea in the first place?
Oh, it wasn't my idea. It was somebody else's idea. They had worked it all out, but it was interesting. Let's put it that way. And the funniest thing about it, we had, I forget what radios we were using at that point, Blaupunks maybe. In the warehouse, we had windows that were about 12 feet high. And when we took inventory, or we went to get radios, and there should have been like 15, there were 3. And when these guys they went out, weren't frisks, but they were pretty well in their street clothes. And it turns out these guys would work as a team. They'd get a radio in the box, get on the forks of the fork truck, get lifted up to the window, and throw them out the window, and their buddies would come and pick them up at night.
Jeez.
Yeah, they didn't realize they were getting crap radios, but but that's how it all started.
Yeah. So I remember there was people had talked about there was a Chicago facility. Right. How big was this? Do you remember? Again, this is the 70s. So
it was a good size. It was a good sized facility. I mean, we still carried parts for the 96, the 95. We had Sonnet bodies in crates. Wow. Probably a half a dozen full Sonnet 3 noses in crates.
Mm-hmm. I remember one of those we had.
Yeah, all the sheet metal for the 96, 95, 99s. It was a large facility. I mean, I think there were 2 docks and then a overhead street level door as well. So it was a good facility. But at that time, I think there was a facility in Orange. There was a facility in Schiller Park. There was a facility in Arlington, Texas. Mm-hmm. And there was a facility in California. The Arlington facility, I think, went away in, I want to say, 75, late 75 mm-hmm. or 76.
And this predates FedEx, so how was everything being shipped back then?
We still shipped. I mean, we had a common carrier come in. I don't know who did the small package stuff, but we had an awful lot of dealers that would come in and pick the stuff up themselves as well. Mm-hmm. So we had quite a few dealers that would come into the warehouse and pick it up themselves.
Do you remember how many dealers Saab had back then nationwide? By chance?
Ooh.
The 70s I know very little about, except that my history professor drove a Saab 99. That was about it.
Yeah, I don't know.
Hundreds or?
For some reason, the number like 100 or something sticks in my head. So I think it was right around there. But of those 320 dealers, I don't know what the percentage was. It was probably pretty high that did very little. I mean, it wasn't that they did very little, but they were... That 70 to probably, you started what, 83?
84.
84. So somewhere probably in 78, 79, 80 range, we started to put pressure on the dealers to either ante up or go away. Because there were so many dealers they were mom and pop shops. They were good facilities for service. They serviced all the British cars. Some of them had the Leyland brands, but they serviced all the British cars. And Saab came in, and for nothing, I mean, I forget what a dealer package was. It was very, very little. I mean, you could be a Saab dealer for very little investment, and you could be a Saab dealer, and that changed your whole position in the community, because now you were a dealer. You belonged to the dealer association. You belonged to this. You did these kind of things, and that really changed your image. Unfortunately, many of them never bothered to change the facility.
Right.
And I had one dealer. I mean, it probably was one of my funniest dealers. There were probably more of them like that in Maine and maybe some other obscure places, but I had a dealer, Gibson Motors, was in Perrysville.
I remember that name. Yeah,
they were a great little dealer. Sold primarily to right on the border of Indiana and Illinois, and they sold primarily into Illinois. But Perrysville was the Saab dealer on one side of the street, a kind of general store hardware, and a cafe on the other side of the street, and maybe a grain elevator a half mile away. That was it. And when the when the old man got the dealership, they had a couple of service bays, kind of a showroom sales area, but their parts department was a room upstairs, and his inventory control was like a painted overhead view of a vehicle, and if the part belonged on the left front fender, whether it was a headlight, a turn signal, a wheel bearing, it was in that corner. If it was for the door, it was in the middle. If it was for the rear, and 95s, 96s, 99s, Sonnets, they were all there. I mean, it was hysterical, but they knew where everything was.
I remember there
So,
was a dealer, I forget where, but they were famous for having wine barrels full of
yeah,
parts. That was their inventory control. Or I think one place they bought an extra 6 cars and they just took parts off them
yeah.
because
Well,
they didn't want to inventory anything.
right,
You know?
yeah,
And speaking of small dealers, I remember a story, I think it was in Iowa. There was like a dealer in the middle of nowhere, like you were describing, something like that. And one of our employees went out there for the first time, and it's like all of a sudden there are Saabs in every farmer's house,
right.
driveway. It was so bizarre to see, but they
Probably
were the
Ames,
only,
Iowa.
yeah, it was probably the only dealer of any brand for quite a while. But
Right.
that
Yeah.
would have been interesting to see.
Yeah.
Gosh, how many people worked in that warehouse facility? Do you remember?
Oh, the standard joke is about half. But there were probably maybe 8 people, including regional manager John Savickas, the regional service manager Ed Mativi, the regional parts manager, and then there was a distribution manager, secretary. There may have been a service training manager. And then the warehouse, we probably had 5 or 6 people in the warehouse. So it was a pretty tight-knit family.
And this was taking orders all by phone, I would imagine, right? To call in your orders or
Yeah,
something.
yeah,
Yeah.
pretty much all by
Wow.
phone. Yeah. Or you
Very
could
different.
send in. I mean, we had dealers that sent in orders as well, but
Okay.
they were handwritten or typed.
Right.
There was no inventory control until, I don't know, probably 76, 77,
Wow.
when we started to push ADP, which was an automated inventory control system. I
Hmm.
mean, we had, I know one of your podcasts, I forget who talked about it, the big computers that had the big discs with the
Yeah.
tapes. Every Friday night, I would take that disc, which was, I don't know, it was probably 20 inches
Yeah.
and 3 or 4 inches thick. I'd take it to a place, and they would update everything for the next day. But we still had everything on key punch cards.
Oh, yeah.
And so, yeah, it was way different.
Oh,
But we started to push the dealers to go to ADP, which was an automated inventory
right.
control system.
Right. And you were getting shipments direct from Sweden to go somewhere else?
I think most of the shipments came from Orange. I think
Oh.
Sweden consolidated everything to Orange.
Hmm.
And then once they got to Orange, they were split. Now, I think sometimes, I don't know what, you're probably working at Meriden, remember the Swedish pallets that had like 10-inch sections that would lift off and collapse.
Hmm.
Every once in a while, we'd get one of those that was direct from Sweden. It would come through Orange, but Orange never processed it. It was just then passed on to Schiller Park.
Yeah.
And sometimes we would then pass it on to Arlington.
We were so amazed at some of the Swedish pallets. They were tongue and groove
Yeah.
and beautiful, like not free wood. And
Oh,
I
yeah.
swear to God, somebody did his flooring in his house with those pallets.
Yeah, absolutely.
It was just getting the big staples out was the hard part. But
Yeah.
they had plenty of wood there. And
Yeah.
the one time I got to go over there, they had like a whole lumber mill there, building them and putting anything crates wise together. It was all right there.
I
But
remember some of the crates with electronics, maybe. I forget what would be in them. But they had masonite, but it was blonde masonite. It wasn't the brown masonite that we always see. And this blonde masonite was beautiful stuff. I made 5 or 6 different things out of it over the years.
so different than a U.S. pallet, that's for sure.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
And so how long did you run that? Now I was trained. A distribution center is not a
Right.
warehouse, John.
Yeah.
You know,
I don't think we ever called it a distribution center. It was the
no.
Show Park warehouse. So,
Well, it was ingrained into me actually by when we outsourced to Caterpillar, and I stole his slide. He had a big picture of the final shot of Indiana Jones. This
right,
is a warehouse. This is
right,
not a distribution center.
right.
We are a distribution center. But
Yeah,
what year?
I, I, I think probably 2 years. During that period of time, if I jump ahead 10 years, I go to Connecticut and I become the product display manager. But during that period of time, we used to have, of the auto shows, we used to have quite a few of them that were in the central region. And one of the bigger ones was the Chicago Auto Show, huge show. And I remember I'd only been there maybe, I don't know, 7 or 8 weeks. And there was, I think it was an EMS, and it might have been the second year for the EMS. I think it came out in 73. But they had an EMS that was on the turntable, and there was a problem with it. Something was wrong. Yeah, I think this is, I'll just,
Oh wow, look at that.
yeah. So anyway, Lynn Lonergan, who was in charge of auto shows at that time, called and said, I need this part down and blah, blah, blah. So I ran it down to McCormick Place, and I go in, and this EMS is on the turntable, and I don't remember, they probably still had it, but if you remember when the cars came in, they were cosmolined, and they'd take the cosmoline off the body, but the body cuts underneath where the jack and all that stuff were, they'd never take the cosmoline off of that because it was below the body line. Mm-hmm. But when you put the car on a turntable, all of a sudden it's pretty much at eye level. So I walk in and I look at this car. I'm a car guy. I mean, I'm a car guy. I'm not. And I walk in and I said, Mr. Lonergan, pardon me, but this looks awful. Mm-hmm. Yeah, but that's the way they come from Sweden. And he said, okay, well, that might be, but it still looks awful. And he says, well, fix it if you want. And so I said, okay. Mm-hmm. So I scurry around Chicago and find some paint thinner or whatever I had to use to get it off and clean it up a little bit and look better. And so I kind of early on established a relationship with Len, mm-hmm. which played out through a lot of my Saab journey. But
he was quite a force at Saab, I remember.
Yeah, he was a good guy, actually. He was a good guy. Mm-hmm. But so about 2 years, and then I became the district parts manager. And at that point, the central region was the central 21 states. It was essentially Ohio to Colorado, Canada to Mexico. And I was the district parts manager.
You mentioned Canada. Did you have service Canada too?
And we didn't service Canada. I did a few things over the years in Canada. I did some training in Canada, but we never sent parts to Canada. Okay. But up to the Canadian border and down to the Mexican border. But there's 21 states in between. And so for about a year, I was the parts rep for all 21 states.
Wow.
So I was flying and driving. I actually had 2 field cars. I kept one in Minneapolis at Maury's Imports, mm-hmm. Because I'd fly up there, get in the car, and then I'd service like the Dakotas and the Twin Cities in Iowa, and maybe go out as far as the Dakotas, Deadwood. We had a dealer in Deadwood.
Really?
Yeah. So, and you'd make them every 6 months maybe. Mm-hmm. And then I think the second year, Andre Nussbaumer came on board.
Oh, yeah, I remember Andre.
And so Andre and I we kind of split the area. So he took the southern part of the 21 states. I took the northern part of the 21 states. Great guy,
wow.
Andre.
Yeah, I remember him. Boy, you must have driven an incredible amount of miles in your lifetime.
Oh, my God. I don't even know.
That's some big parts of the world.
Big parts of the world. But, yeah. You know, it was, I think my first 11 or 12 field cars were orange 99s with brown cloth interior. We had so many of them. We had so many of them, you know.
Was that the I don't know how to say it, the least favorable color back then? I remember later it was the tans, the
Yeah,
beiges.
I don't know whether it was the least favorable or whether it was just over ordered, but there were a lot of them. And so
Yeah,
I most of the time I had two orange field cars, one I'd keep in Minneapolis and one I'd have in Chicago area.
that's funny. How big an engine was it back then?
It's
Was it
two
a
liter. It was an
two
eight
liter?
valve two
Yeah.
liter. Yeah, we
Okay.
because at 74 they went to the Scania built 2 liter. They went to the 8 valve head. They dropped the Dolomite engine. The Dolomite engines were last used in 73. So I didn't do much. I mean, when I came in, there was a handful of 96s and 95s. Still parts. I mean, I was parts, so there were still quite a few parts going out. Sonnets were still being sold all through 74. So the regional manager, so John Savickas, he loved sonnets. So I was around the sonnet a little bit and had a little seat time in the sonnet threes. They were fun little cars, actually.
Hmm. So of the '70s, what were your favorite Saabs from that era?
Oh, obviously the EMS at that point was the Saab. I mean,
Yeah.
everything else. You had the 3 doors and the 5 doors and the GLs and that kind of stuff. The cars were pretty much the same. The EMS was special because while it was not mechanically different, it was personality and fitting different. It had an upgraded interior. The vinyl mixed with the velour inside. It had the nicer EMS wheels. We were always offering some kind of stripe on it. I don't know. I had a photo here. One of my early field cars. We couldn't get any trailer hitches or anything at that point, and so yeah, I did a little
Okay.
motocrossing, and
Hmm.
that was probably a 76 EMS. So it had the C scoop, but I found a single wheel trailer that I could just slide over the bumper and use it on any Saab. So that was one of the advantages. But the EMS was by far my favorite Saab until the SPG came out. I loved
Yeah.
SPGs. They were
Did
just
you like the '78 turbos?
yeah. It was hard to get one. I mean, when by that time, God, I'm trying to think where I was in 78. I might have still been in parts. No, I wouldn't have been in parts, but for whatever reason, Kenny Grauberger had one of the early 77 turbos. It was a 2 door coupe, which they brought in just a handful of them. It was a really sweet little
Yeah, I
car.
never heard of that.
Oh yeah, they brought in. There might have been 3 or 4 of them brought in. Most of them
Okay.
were 3 door hatchbacks. They were all the candy apple red.
Hmm.
All had the turbo wheels, but this one was in a 2 door coupe body, and so I had some experience in them, but it was impossible to get a
Yeah,
turbo field car. They were just in so much demand.
sure, sure. Well, being your those first 2 years as a field rep, did you think this is my calling? I love being a field rep, or it's just so different than being a warehouse manager?
Well, it was growth. I mean, it was. I enjoyed it. I enjoyed the dealership aspect of it because I mean I'd be a different dealer every day. I mean sometimes twice a day, and unlike a lot of guys on the road, most of the people that I was with in the central region at that point, a lot of the district sales managers, district service managers had come from Renault.
Hmm.
Renault brought in all their cars to Toledo, and when they left the market, a lot of the Renault people jumped on the Saab ship, so to
Okay.
speak.
Yeah.
So a lot of the guys I worked with came from Renault, but a lot of times you'd kind of make a joint dealer visit if you could. So I'd go in, I'd drive or fly, and I'd meet Ed Zamalski or Bob Angelino up in the Twin Cities or Ross Offenstein in Oklahoma. And then we'd go into the dealership as a unit because we got more of the dealer's attention.
Hmm.
If we went on
These are
single,
service reps or sales
those were
reps?
sales reps. Those were
Sales
sales
reps.
reps. Service rep would usually be there as well. I mean, like when I'd go out to Colorado, I'd be with Bill Miles and Kenny Grauberger, and so Bill and Kenny and I would go into the dealerships together because you could sit the dealer down and you'd have a better conversation.
Hmm.
Because the service rep would talk about service or warranty challenges. As a parts rep, I'd talk about trying to get them to go to the ADP or upgrade their inventory control system and that kind of stuff. And so when you had the leverage of the district sales manager with you, it was easier because they wanted special cars. So if they agreed, I mean, it wasn't, you weren't doing arm twisting openly, but if they agreed to the things that service and parts wanted, it was a little easier to get the products you wanted as well.
Yeah, they kind of were steering me to that career path, but I traveled a bit with people, but it just wasn't a good fit for me. I applaud you for doing it because well, it's not for everybody, that's for sure.
Yeah,
Uh,
I mean, I've traveled all my life. I mean,
yeah,
most of my life has been home on Friday, gone on Monday. But
right.
you get some of these people. I remember Ross Offenstein, good
Hmm.
guy. And so first time I'm traveling with him, we're going to go see a dealer somewhere. And he was, I mean, he was a fine dresser. Ross was, I mean, he was always very, very well dressed. And the first time we get in his car, we're going to meet some dealer, and we start driving, and he gets a towel and puts it over his lap. I said, what's going on here? I didn't know what he had in mind while he was driving. But it was just so if the steering wheel was dirty, he didn't wipe his hands on his pants.
Oh, okay.
It's a little scary that first few miles for me. But Andre traveling. You could never eat or drink in Andre's cars.
Mm.
It was forbidden. You know, Andre's cars were always perfect. So
Mm.
it was, I mean, for the most part, everybody in the central region, it was a really good team. I
Mm.
mean, we all got along. We all respected each other. So it was never a challenge. I mean, I enjoyed traveling with almost anybody.
Mhm.
And then the service guys, I don't know. I'm trying to remember all of them. The one that was most beneficial from a mentoring standpoint was a guy by the name of Red Rambo. I don't know whether you ever,
Oh, I remember that name. Yeah,
but man, what a guy! What a
yeah,
guy! I
yeah.
mean, huge guy. I mean, big guy,
Mhm.
6'6", 6'7", had hands like twice the size of mine, and I mean, and just the nicest guy you'd ever meet. And if he found something funny, it was I mean, a knee slapper for him.
Mhm.
He is a really, really great guy.
Yeah.
Helped me an awful lot in my career.
I remember that name and some other names, but
Yeah.
it was the regions were obviously separated by distance, but there were not a lot of all employee meetings back then, so our paths didn't cross that
Right.
often.
Right. Right.
Well, continuing along your timeline here, your part, and then you were a service manager. You mentioned it was the worst year of your life.
Worst year of my life.
Why?
God, it was awful. I'm trying to think of when it was. I mean, I tried to look and find something with a timeline on. It must have been 77, 78, somewhere in there. We had a 12-month warranty.
Yeah.
And these guys were spending, I mean, granted, the cars weren't as expensive as they were when we left, but we had a 12-month warranty. And
How did that? How did that interrupt? Sorry, I'm interrupting. How did that compare with the industry average? Was that much
oh,
less than
I don't
competitors?
think, no, I don't think it was
No.
that much different. I mean, the industry was pretty much 12 months across the board,
Hmm.
but it was still 12 months. And I mean,
Yeah.
when the dealers would try to deal with as much of the customer dissatisfaction as they could, but so every time you went to a dealership, you usually had a line of disgruntled customers.
Yeah.
I remember I was in Dayton It was a dealer in Dayton. Nice little mom and pop shop. Good store. And I walked in, and there was a woman there, I don't know, early 20s, mid-20s maybe. And she had a Sonnet, and it had, the clutch was out of it first. And that was not an easy repair, because you had to take the nose off the car and blah, blah. It was complicated repair. And she said, I mean, and she was out of warranty by probably 6 or 7 months. It wasn't really a thing that you had much ability to goodwill.
Yeah.
And I remember I'm standing there with the dealer, and the dealer goes away to get something, and she comes up to me and says, if you come home with me for lunch, you'll definitely want to fix this car when I do it.
Jeez.
And I said, and if I were to say that I didn't momentarily think about it, I'd lie. But I said, I don't think we can do that.
Wow.
And then the second one that sticks out in my mind, I was in Minnesota. Guy had a Belgian car, I think, and as I saw Dan
Famous
David,
for rusting.
yeah, Dan David's, and so this guy had a Belgium car, and it was in, and there was some rust. I forget whether it was on the roof or the trunk lid or whatever. And he was out of warranty by, again, 6-8 months. And the guy says, well, I've been out of warranty and I've had stuff fixed. And I said, I'm curious how you had stuff fixed out of warranty. He says, well, I had a whole exhaust system that was bad, and the service rep said there was no way you could fix it. And so I said, well, your two choices are you can either fix it or I'll stick you up it. And he said, and he decided to fix it. I said, well, I don't think that's going to work, but we can try. But it was just awful. It was just awful. Service, worst year of my life.
Yeah.
So,
but it was just 1 year?
It was just 1 year. For whatever reason, whoever my sales manager was left, and they said, you're going to be a district sales manager. It was a small district. It was like Indiana, northern Kentucky, and western Ohio, and maybe a dealer or two in Michigan. It was my biggest dealer was probably 15 cars a month. So, and most of them were 2 or 3 cars a month. So I said, yeah, and I became a district sales manager. I was supposed to be in Columbus, Ohio, as the base for whatever this region was. So I think it had West Virginia. And I rented an apartment and got everything set up for about a day. And then they said, all right, we're changing. They restructured the whole district thing. And I wound up in Indianapolis again. So, but it was a small district, but it was a good district to kind of learn in. You know, most of the dealers I already knew because I'd had them as district parts manager. So it was a good learning place. About that time, they started to have sales incentives for the district managers. We were trying to increase our sales, so they'd incentivize sales to the dealers. And it was all based on numbers and not percentages. And I used to fight this all the time. I said, yeah, but I don't have any dealers with any numbers. I mean, if I hit 1,000%, I'd still be below most of you guys that have Chicago or Dallas or Houston or those kind of places. And so it fell on deaf ears. And fortunately, because a couple of years later, I had Chicago, and it was a win-win for me. But it was a good place to learn. It was funny because I was thinking about it the other day. I had a dealer in Lafayette, Indiana, and he was a good dealer. He was a good service dealer, but he was a terrible dealer. His wife used to sit on a stool holding a little, I don't know, some kind of little Havanese or pug or something all day long. She was the parts manager. And his name was Don Dumford. And he'd service cars and that kind of stuff, but he never did anything. And he was in Lafayette, which should have been an 8 or 10 car a month market, and that was a 1 or 2 car market for him. So Rich Miller was just assigned as my service manager, and great guy. We're still good friends. I just saw him I don't know, 6, 8 weeks ago.
Mm-hmm.
So Rich's first meeting with me, we meet in the parking lot of this dealership. We go in, and I introduce Rich. I said, this is your new service manager, Rich Miller, blah, blah, blah. And I said, Don, I've got 2 documents here. I've got an order for 10 cars, which he'd never ordered 10 cars, maybe in a year, let alone in one order. I said, and the other one is a letter of termination, voluntary letter of termination. I thought Rich was going to, I thought he was going to choke to death. And he did terminate eventually. But this guy had a Shelby GT 350R in the back room. And I mean, some serious cars, but you look at them and, but so those kind of things, you know. And then
Cool.
I think I probably did that district for a year, give or take. And then I moved to the Chicago district where I had Chicago, Milwaukee, Peoria, a handful of smaller dealers, but I probably had 4 or 5 dealers in the Chicago region, and I think 3 dealers in Milwaukee alone. So half of my dealers were in those 2 markets.
And this is when you became a district sales manager.
Yeah, this was the district sales manager for an A district.
And that's an interesting transition because in my time, I don't remember a lot of parts or service guys moving to sales.
It wasn't common. It wasn't common. But I had a good relationship with the dealers. I started in a warehouse, so I knew a lot of the dealers that would come in and out to pick up parts. I had a lot of, I won't say connections, but, you know, I had a good relationship with Lonergan. Ralph Millett, whose name's come up on a couple of your podcasts. Ralph had a son that was going to Culver Military School in Indiana. And I learned really early on, because all the guys in the region were, I don't know, most of them were 10, 15 years older than I was. I mean, I was young. I was a kid. And so I learned young, we'd meet somebody, be at the airport, be at a hotel or something. When all these district guys would line up on the side of the sidewalk waiting for whoever to get out of the car and have their 12 seconds of shaking hands and saying hello. And I'd go to the trunk and grab their bags. Mm-hmm. And I'd have 7 minutes with them. Mm-hmm. So all these guys knew me. Yep. They knew that I could get stuff done. Mm-hmm. And these old guys never, ever figured it out. I still tell young people, I said, never be afraid to carry a bag. Because that's where you get your quality time.
Yeah.
So all these guys in Connecticut, Ralph and Lenny, and at that point Jonas Kellberg, they all knew who I was. So if my name came up for anything, pretty much, oh yeah, we know him. He's a good guy. Mm-hmm. And so it was an easy transition. Plus I the regional manager at that point, John Savickas. John was a unique guy. He was a brilliant strategist, good marketer, but he was a terrible people person. Dealers didn't like him. He didn't know how to talk to them. And so throughout the course of my career, John would always ask me to help him do stuff. If he needed to have something done with a dealer, he'd say, could you do this for me? So I spent a lot of time wherever I was, whether it was parts, service, or sales, doing these special op things. Because Ralph Miller would call me and say, Gunlog, his wife is coming into town. She's going to go see our boy at the academy. Could you pick her up at the airport, get her a car, and all this kind of stuff? And I'd say, well, did you talk to John? He said, don't worry about it. It's fine. Just do it. So it was a very unique situation for me. Yeah. So,
and especially being out so far west of the main office. I mean, you're not highly visible,
right?
Like the guys in New England or something that would maybe stop by the region every day or two or week or whatever.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, it was. Yeah, we used to have guys from the main office come out and visit us. I think there's a picture of one there.
Oh, jeez. What is that of?
It was a rabbit at some autocross that Rich Miller and I were at. I had to throw that in for my national guys.
That's funny.
And then I became one eventually.
So you were a regional sales manager, and how long did that last? Chicago and Milwaukee.
Yeah, after when I moved from the region or from the Chicago district, which was great fun. I mean, I had Scala O'Brien, who at one point was either the biggest or in the top 2 or 3 dealers in the country. He was a big Porsche Audi dealer, and they took on Saab, and he really did a great job for Saab in Chicago. And then we also had Fields Cadillac, which was a big store in Evanston, the North Shore, and they did a good job. So, and then we had a third dealer, Flickama Motors, which was a little bitty store, but a great Saab dealer.
Yeah,
a great Saab dealer, a little bitty store, but he sold 10, 15, 20 cars a month. His service business was off the charts, his parts business. I mean, great dealer, an old Dutchman. I'd say, John, and the company line, John, you need to build a new building, you need to blah, 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 blah. And then we'd, like you always did, you'd take a walk in the parking lot and where there were no cameras, no witnesses, and it was, but John, if you did, you'd be a fool. Because, I mean, you're doing a great job. If you build a mausoleum, the only people that are going to make money are the people building the mausoleum and maybe your salespeople. Your income won't change a bit. You know? So, unless you can double your sales overnight, which in most cases that wasn't a possibility. So then we started to grow, and we started to get heavy into dealerization. Like we talked before, we had a lot of these mom and pop shops that were 3rd Street garages that some of them spiffed up and added a little addition and that kind of stuff. But for the most part, they weren't where the market needed to be. And 2 things, I think. One, our dealers, and 2, our product in that late 70s, early 80s. I think that really was the ball and chain that ultimately drug Saab down. You know, the dealers, they just weren't, because at that point, I mean, Mercedes had the 190, BMW just brought out the 3 Series, Audi had the 4000, the 5000. The 5000 was always in trouble. General Motors had just brought out the X body, I think, in 79, which was their first volley into front-wheel drive. So the market was really was bubbling. And Porsche Audi put pressure on the dealers. They stepped up. They had to step up. Volvo was lucky that they always had standalone dealers. BMW, same thing. They had they had the 5, or at that point probably the Bavarian and some of the higher line sports cars. But we were stuck in marginal dealers in a lot of places. And we believed our own press in a lot of places. I used to have, when I was a district sales manager, I'd go to Connecticut occasionally and sit in meetings with Bill Walters and Jerry Plant and these guys, and I'd say, where's the leather interiors? Why can't we have leather interiors? Why can't we have an air conditioner that will blow a Kleenex off the vent? And they give you the typical Swedish line. Yeah, the vinyl, the velour seats are safer because you're not going to slide around. I said, hey, I don't recall sliding out of any car I've ever driven with a leather seat. And they just didn't read the writing on the wall. And I think that put Saab, I don't know whether I was going to say put Saab back, but I don't know that it would be put Saab back. I just don't know that it didn't put Saab in a position where it could never catch up.
Right.
because when we got to that level, everybody else was already 2 or 3 notches above where
Sure.
that ante that we failed to put in the late 70s.
Yeah.
So, but
And talking to other guests, I mean, same things like, why can't we have a white car? Why isn't there a cup holder? Why can't you get rid of these Sony radios? It
yeah,
just was always something
yeah.
that was holding us back, like we had a leash on or
Yeah,
something. You know.
radios were disaster. I mean, I know I've heard people talk about the radios. For me, the radio wasn't so much of an issue as speakers. I mean, speakers were just awful. I mean, they were terrible. And I talked to, I don't know whether it was Jerry Plant, Dan David, one of them once when I was out in Connecticut, and they said, well, we could go to a better speaker, but it would be 7 or 8 cents a car. I said, well, we're spending X amount of warranty, and I know when you multiply it times 100,000 and that, it's a big ticket. But the challenge was the warranty money and the build money. It was like nobody ever compared those two monies.
Mm.
And that to me was a challenge because it's customer retention for 7 cents or 8 cents a car was a big thing. So you said something. Oh, cup holders, cup holders.
Yeah.
When we got to that point where everybody had cup holders, when we'd go to Connecticut and we'd say, why can't we have cup holders? And they'd give us some goofy reason. A lot of the Swedes they don't. The rest of Europe and the rest of the world don't drink and eat in their car. I said, well, good for them.
Mm-hmm.
So I would typically, I didn't care who it was. I mean, it could have been the president of Saab AB. They'd come out occasionally and they'd want to make dealer visits, and I'd get assigned as the sales operations guy to take them to the dealer visit or do this. And all the time, it was so funny, John, because I'd say, all right, if we're going to be here, we got to start early. And I'd pick them up at like 6 o'clock in the morning.
Oh,
I'd go to McDonald's, I'd get coffee and stuff in a bag, and then go to the car. And these Swedes would sit there sometimes for 30 miles, holding a cup of coffee in their bag, and they'd say, are we going to stop to eat? And I said, oh, no, we're moving. It was one of the most enjoyable parts of that particular part of because they wouldn't talk about it at all. It was like, we can't have this conversation. All right, I'm up in the front driving with one knee, eating a Big Mac and having a Coke, and they're sitting there, and, like still with their lunch money and their bag lunch in their hand. It was hysterical.
I kind of remember hearing, oh, well, that would encourage drinking and driving, so we can't have a cup holder.
Yeah.
And but I also remember back then, I think a video went around. Remember the radio show Car Talk, the two brothers, PBS, and they profiled, I think it was the Chevy Lumina, and counted the cup holders. There were 15 cup holders in that van.
Right.
And I think somebody showed that to Sweden, and I think finally the message was getting through that Americans want cup holders.
Right.
A purpose of superior aerodynamics is reduced wind resistance. Introducing the Chevrolet Lumina all-purpose vehicle.
That's funny.
That was the biggest challenge. I mean, we were, I don't know, at one point probably 60% of their market.
Yeah.
And it was like, well, we build the car for Sweden. But and the Germans and the Italians and the French and everybody else figured it out. That if I want to be in this market, I have to listen to the market. And Saab just never wanted to do that until the 9000. And probably the only reason we got it with the 9000 is because of the collaboration with the Italians and the Germans and whoever else was in on that. I forget what was Lancia Delta, the Fiat Chroma, the 9000, and there was one other car that was off of that platform. I forget what it was. But that was probably the only reason we even got it in those cars. Is because of the other markets that wanted to please their customers.
Yeah. A lot of previous guests were huge fans of the 9000. What was your impressions
I
of it?
love the 9000.
Yeah.
The only thing about the 9000, I was in my sales operation role and then later on in the role of product display manager and sales training manager. I was gone to Sweden probably a minimum of 2 times a year, and I think my most was 10 times one year. And I think the 9000 came out in what, 86?
86, yeah.
86 or
85 in the rest of the world, I think, or Sweden.
yeah, 86. Because I think 86 was when we had the big dealer meeting in Nashville. I think that was the beginning of
Yeah.
the 9000. I went to Sweden in 84 and drove a 9 Stockholm to essentially Trollhättan. And I was amazed that nobody looked at it. I was frightened, actually,
Yeah.
that it didn't register as a new car, a new product. I think most people just assumed it was German or Italian or something other than a Saab, because the logo, the badges were covered and that kind of stuff. But it was a remarkable car. I thought the 9000 was the best of everything.
I remember the TV ad. We built a 5-passenger Porsche.
In March 1986, the Saab 9000 was put through a series of tests at Le Mans and Montlhéry in France. When it was over, the Saab driver said,
I don't believe it. We built a 5-passenger Porsche.
Yeah. It was a great car. I mean, when I left in 82, I took a Saab 9000S and drove it up until, the fall of 96, when I ultimately moved to Europe for a little while. And my father-in-law, he drove the car for another 10 years, actually.
Wow.
It was a beautiful, it was that, I forget what the color was, rose something. It was kind of
rose quartz, maybe?
rose
isn't it?
quartz with a
Yeah.
red leather, that maroon
Metallic.
leather. It was a beautiful car. It was a beautiful car.
Yeah.
So, but yeah, I loved. I mean, short of the SPG, the 9000 was by far the best Saab we ever made.
Cool. Well, going back to your timeline, because then I want to ask you about maybe if I'm remembering a time when our paths crossed. But first of all, you were regional sales operations manager, so you oversaw the whole region car sales operation.
Right.
How
So
many people work for you?
at that point, I mean, my direct relationships were primarily with the regional manager, who at that point would have been Howard Smith, and the district sales managers, who I think there were 7 districts in the central region. I still interacted with the district service managers and those kind of stuff. But as I said, at that point, we were in a real heavy dealerization program, because the South was, it was marginal for us. I mean, you had to be a strong-willed person to have a Saab 99 in the South. When the 900 came out, it was a better car. It had a better air conditioning system. It was a little bit sleeker. It was by far a nicer car. As I said earlier, the BMWs, the Audis of the world, they were bringing out more nice cars. I mean, you had the 3 Series 4-doors at that point. Audi, I don't know. They must have transitioned into the A Series cars, or were about to leave the 5000 and go to the A4s, A6s. And so there were a lot of dealers that were struggling, and they wanted an import car, particularly Cadillac dealers and Lincoln dealers. So my biggest challenge probably as the sales operation manager, was to kind of change the dealer base, find the dealers that were underperforming, or just not in the right place in the marketplace, and encourage them to step up or step out. So at one point, I think they referred to me as in the region as the Terminator, because I terminated a bunch of dealers. I mean, I just go in and say, look, here's what happened. We've looked at the market, and the stats say this is where Saab sales should be, and you're far below that. So here's what it's going to take to get there. So
is this the early 80s?
Yeah, I mean, it was right after the 900 came out. And I think the 900 came out in 79. We had the big dealer meeting, I think, in San Diego in 79, which was the introduction of the Saab 900. And the 900 was a more viable car. The air conditioning was integrated. It wasn't a hang-on unit under the dash and that kind of stuff. So, and as I said, a lot of these Cadillac and Lincoln dealers especially wanted something in their showrooms that competed with the imports, because, you know, there was a lot of interest in the imports. Lincoln dealers, they brought in the McClure brand for a little while. Cadillac had the Cimarron for an hour and a half. So, but they just weren't there. I mean, so we did a lot of Cadillac and Lincoln dealers. I mean, we had a bunch of Cadillac and Lincoln dealers. And about that same time, we developed a program that was called the Dealer Introduction Team. And I don't know, maybe whether it carried through the rest of the regions eventually or not. But if we signed a new dealer, we'd set up a date, and we'd say, we're going to be there like Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, and we'd get all the parts. We'd help them put the parts on the shelves. We'd have training workshops for the technicians. We'd have sales training programs. But the first night, we would always have a full dealership meeting. Everybody from the dealership was invited, and we'd bring in pizza and this, and we'd show the movie. We carried around this big 16-inch reel of the movie with the airplanes on, and we'd have a big party. And I kind of developed this walk around where I'd take a 900 and pretty much set it up a half hour before the meeting, and I'd take all but one of the bolts out of the hood, and I'd undo all the things in the front seats and a lot of the other stuff. And we'd go around, and I'd say, I want to talk about the 900. And we'd talk about the aerodynamics and that kind of stuff. And we'd open the hood, because it was unusual. The reverse opening hood was kind of unique. And I'd say, and then the 2-liter engine. But well, there's a lot of you here tonight. It's probably hard for some of you. And while I'm talking, I'm taking that one bolt out, and I just pull the hood off and hand it to whoever the district service manager was. So here's a car in the showroom with no hood and the engine standing around there. And then we talk about the inside and the heated seats and the lumbar supports and all that. And I say, well, it's kind of hard to see, so I just release that one tab that was there by thread and just take the seat out and be pointing and pull the whole thing apart. It was so much fun.
That's where the story that I'm remembering. That I think you did that. Well, I attended a class like that. You did one for new employees, I think, when I started, and there were like
probably, I
don't know, 60 or 70 of us at Railroad Avenue. Yeah, and I was still had us 84. But I remember when you took the seat out, I think you either had a tape measure or you had a really long 2x4 or something.
Yeah, 2x4 or something, probably.
Look how long you can put. Nobody could believe it. It was like 15 feet long. Yeah. And for people that were not driving a Saab, and that their eyes would go, wow. Yeah. But I always remember you said, and if you take out the spare tire, it becomes an ice chest.
Exactly. You were paying attention. Good for you.
I was there. I remember that.
Because it had a drain.
Yeah.
I mean, that first night, we would totally change the opinion of the dealership on Saab. It was so good. We had so much fun. We had so much fun.
I remember the reactions in the audience of like, "Oh my God," or "I never knew," and it was a great. And I guess you transitioned that to your role in Connecticut, because that's where it was. I remember in that class. You know?
Right. I carried that through. I mean, I did it, I don't know, 4 or 5 places around the world. I mean, some point, you know. So it was in early '82. We had just set record after record after record after record. And I think that auto shows, I mean, we had the big shows, New York, Chicago, Los Angeles, and then we had all these secondary shows. I think at one point there were 82 shows of one level or another that Saab participated in.
Wow.
That's a lot of shows. So I, gone back to that third week with Lenny Lonergan, because after a little while, Lenny got to the point, he'd say, this show's happening. I'm busy. Can you just do it for me? And whatever I was doing, whether it was service, sales, parts, whatever, I'd say, yeah, just clear it with John. And so I'd do the show. I'd go out and do the show. So I was doing almost everything in the central region show-wise. Mm-hmm. And there was a lot of things going on. I think Dan David alluded to there were people being added to Connecticut all the time in the early 80s. And I'm sitting one day and I thought, we're going along and they're adding all these people. And one day, Sten or Bob or somebody's going to come up with the idea that they need an auto show manager. Because everybody had one except Saab. Mm. And I said, I've been doing this for a long time. I enjoy it. And I've seen the writing on the wall that they're going to decide that this is going to happen. And somebody's going to walk by the door and they're going to say, hey, you're it. And I said, I'm not going to let that happen. So I don't know if you remember Carol Canfield. She was Sten's secretary.
Okay.
Yeah,
right.
I had a good relationship with her because I was always doing something back and forth. I think she may have been not the primary secretary, but backup secretary for Dick Rochford as well. Mm-hmm. And so Rochford, being the merchandising marketing manager, I was doing a lot of things because I'd been heavily involved in the 79 introduction of the 900. And so I called Carol Canfield and I said, put me on Sten's calendar. And she said, why? And I said, just put me on Sten's calendar. So I took and put all the stuff I'd done for all these shows and down, and the day came, I got on a flight, bought a ticket, flew to Connecticut, and, walked into Sten's office, and he said, I don't know how much personal relationship you had with Sten, but he was a great guy. He had these kind of half glasses that were, he'd wear them down on his nose.
Hi, I wish I could be there with you in Strasbourg to share in the excitement of the preparation for the introduction of the Saab 9000 in Europe. In the United States, we have to wait for the 9000 introduction until the 1986 model year. In the meantime, things are going very well here in America with the 900 models. Let me review with you our sales development over recent years.
So I walk in his office, and that's the look, and I said, we're at a point that we probably should have a national auto show manager. We're involved in X amount of shows, we're spending X amount of money, we're doing this, we're doing that, we're competing in these markets against these cars. And I said, and honestly, Sten, there's only one person in the company that's qualified to do it, and that would be me. Mm-hmm. And I said,
that's a pretty bold thing to do.
Well, it was either that or lose it. It was either that or lose it, John. No guts, no glory.
Right.
And as a combat soldier, I'm not afraid of much then. I'm not afraid of much now. So I had nothing to lose and everything to gain. So we had.
But he saw it your way.
Well, he said, so I had some other business to do with Rochford anyway, so I'm out there talking to Dick, and I don't know, about 2 hours later, he calls me into his office. He says, can you do sales training too? And I said, yeah, why not? I said, all right. So, whether there was a position or not, that day I became the National Product Display and Sales Training Manager. So
that's a huge plate.
Yeah. It was so much fun, though. It was so much fun. The shows we had, in comparison, no budget. We had an awful show company. The material we had was, it didn't help Saab any, let's put it that way. So I struggled, and eventually, I think when we had the Nashville meeting, I finally convinced Sten to give me the budget to go out for a bid for all new show properties. And I'd been next to Honda all the time at these shows. And Honda wasn't much bigger than Saab at that point. It was pretty small.
Yeah.
And so I'm struggling every show. I'm struggling with this company at 6:59, because most of the shows opened at 7 o'clock Friday night. I'm struggling at 6:59 to be ready, and the Honda rep's gone to lunch at noon and not coming back with the company that they've got doing their stuff. So probably late '74, I made an RFQ that only the George P. Johnson Company could answer. I mean, it was because they were the ones.
Yeah.
And eventually
that's a huge business, right? I mean, the whole auto show.
Yeah. So
Show
they
pieces.
eventually, they eventually won the bid. And then I got involved, and they were the provider for Chrysler since the 30s, and all the Japanese products and all this kind of stuff. And these guys had budgets. They all had budgets. I had nothing. So, I mean, fortunately in school, when I was in high school, I took drafting courses and all that kind of stuff. So either most of the time at night, I'd do the floor plans, and I'd do all the routing structures, and I'd do all the stuff on my own, take it to the blueprinter, have blueprints made, send it to all the people. And it was so unusual for George P. because they didn't do that. They'd have 5 or 6 people. And I said, well, here's the deal. That's the only business I can give you. You know, I need you to set the stuff up. You need to make the stuff. And a lot of times my providers, my project people at George P. would always be in trouble with the account executives and upper management, because I'd draw stuff on a legal pad and say, this is what I want about the measurements, this kind of stuff. Just send it directly to them, and they'd say, well, this has to go through the account executive. I said, it doesn't need to. This is what I. And it was a good relationship. I mean, we got a lot of stuff done. We did an awful lot for not very much money.
So was the design, did it change every year, the auto show?
No, I
displays?
mean, we had fixed properties, and I'll send you, I got a couple of good photos. We had fixed properties, and I think that when we did it, I saw something the other day that was one of my flow charts, because we'd start at the beginning of the year. You'd know what shows in September, October, all the way through March. And I'd learned, having the close relationship with the dealers, that dealers, as smart as they are, at some points they're not very bright. And so when we essentially had 3 identical kits made, because we had shows like Chicago was too close to Detroit.
Right, and there was some overlap.
So there was overlap. So you had to have like 3 separate kits. And another thing at George P. Johnson, they freaked out, because I said, do you want you want A, B, and C, or 1, 2, and 3? And I said, no, because then the dealers will freak out, because they'll all want the A kit or the 1 kit. Because, but Mr. Dealer, they're all the same. Okay, well, they're all the same, then give me the A kit. Give some other schmuck the B kit. And so I said, I think I had an orange kit, a blue kit, and a green kit. There's no hierarchy to color. And I never had to question. You get the orange kit. Okay, fine. And then I think I had a kit called the plaid kit, which was a hodgepodge of some old stuff, some new stuff, some of the, something old, something new, something borrowed, something blue. But it was so much fun. I mean, we were busy. It's all over the point. But
was the design, was it committee between you and the vendor, or people behind the scenes at Saab, or who just made those, or Sweden, who made the decisions?
It was pretty, when we put it out to bid, the bid was, in addition to fabrication and management, it was also design. And we had some parameters, like we want to be able to do this, we want to have ID that's X amount of high, we want to have a platform. I don't think we ever had turntables because they were just too expensive to set up. A turntable cost a ton of money, but it had a lot of weight. It was heavy drayage, took a lot of manpower and time. So I had a slanted platform that was nice. It still showed the car well. It was different than anybody else. And so the design that George P. came back with, the towers were actually, if you looked at them from ground level, they had Saab on three sides, but if you looked at them overhead, they were the same kind of Y that was on the sprocket of the first Scania bicycle. So that's where they pulled the idea from. So they did their homework. It was, they did their homework. It's a good company, and I presented it to whoever the powers that be were at that point, and it was accepted. And then we used the properties the first time in Nashville at the dealer event to beat all dealer events in Saab history, anyway, that I'm aware of. It's a wonderful time.
Right.
So,
who installed and tore down all the displays?
George P. Yeah, I mean, usually what would happen, I had a supervisor that was a dedicated supervisor, worked for George P. And then I had a couple of secondary ones. So the supervisor would go in, George P. would order local labor, depending, because at that point a lot of the halls were still union halls.
Right.
So we'd have to have union labor. They'd order the electrical. I had two different carpet distributors to place the carpet, but it was pretty much all done through George P. And then most of the time, the bigger shows, I'd go in for the setup and then spend a couple days with the dealers. I tried to tie it in with a sales training event or something like that. So
you were also attending all the big shows, or
absolutely, big shows here and most of the big shows in Europe, because on my role as sales training, most of the introductions for product were Geneva, London. Where else? Those were the two big shows, the London show and the Geneva show. Saab always had a big presence at. Frankfurt as well. Geneva, Frankfurt, and London, Saab had a big presence. So I would and Paris, I would frequently go to those four shows as well, because a lot of times it was where new product was, or new concept cars. We still every once in a while did concept cars. We had the EV1 prior to the turbo. We had a pearlescent white three-door 99 turbo, I think it was. A beautiful car. It was all pearlescent white. Funny story, because it came in it was airshipped in some kind of container or tied down on a cookie sheet. When it came in, there were like 5 or 6 little detail marks on it, and the Swedes just freaked out. I mean, because for Sweden to make a concept car or something special and fly it over, so they freaked out, and they were looking for custom painters and this kind of stuff. And I said, I'm looking at the car, and I said, give us a couple, give me an hour or so. So I went to the drugstore and found all the pearlescent white nail polish I could find. and just, I did a test strip, and I said, how you like that match? Is that one better? And we touched it up with nail polish.
Oh, God, that's funny.
And, oh, God, I don't know. It was probably 20 years later. I was in Trollhättan with Dan Repmark, and the car's in the museum. And the curator's there, and I said, can I step over the ropes and look at that car? I want to see if my touch-up work is still there. And he said, oh, no, this car's been all remanufactured. It's all brand new. I said, okay, well, before I step over, I'll tell you where the points are going to be. There was one on the roof and like two on the hood and one on the rear quarter. And sure enough, they were all there, still there. So nail polish always works.
Sure.
Very funny.
Sure. Oh, that's great. When you mentioned the EV1, I flashed back that it had a small background role in the second Back to the Future movie. Were you involved at all in cars in the movies or TV? No, not part of
No,
that.
we had somebody on the West Coast that
Yeah.
was, I forget who it was. Somehow the name Paul Florence keeps popping up in
Yeah, I
some
don't
of the
remember.
stuff I had, he might have had some role in that. I don't recall, but I know we had early '80s. I think it was through Peter Burla that they organized that, because Peter and Stan and Bob were all from the West Coast.
Mhm.
They were all involved with all that stuff out there. So they, with Volvo, they knew who the contacts were,
Right.
and so, but we had a dedicated person out there that did that.
So this is because I worked my first few months the New York Auto Show.
Right.
So I think you were probably there,
Yeah.
and I was put on a beige base car way in the back because it was my first auto show. And oh God, I drove down there and I was at the Armory back then, I think. New York
Yeah, it could have
Armory.
been. Could
Yeah.
have been before the Javits opened.
Yeah. And then I parked the car underground. I'm walking up the stairs and I get flashed by a guy. And I'm like, oh my God, I'm in New
Yeah.
York.
Welcome to New
And
York.
oh my God. And then go to the show. And I think if I remember, though, you couldn't open the hoods because people would steal batteries or
Right. Oh
something.
yeah.
And I had to show how the back seat went down flat. And I counted. It was 163 times
Yeah.
in one
Yeah.
Friday night, I
Yeah.
remember.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
it was like, oh my God, how do you do this?
Yeah.
And then I did the Boston show once, I think.
Okay. Yeah.
That was a big show.
Yeah.
And I don't
Yeah.
remember what I did there, but yeah, that's a big operation. A lot of
Yeah.
logistics for
Yeah,
sure.
I loved show business. I mean, that's
Yeah.
I've done it all my life. I still do stuff occasionally for
Yeah.
Volkswagen. Yeah.
Well, because I remember afterwards being in the parts department, I would get a list of everything that was stolen out of the
Right.
cars.
Right. All the damage.
And oh my God, it was like
Yeah.
anything that wasn't glued down
Right.
hard. And,
Right.
but when somebody said once one of the batteries was stolen, like, how do you walk out with that under your coat? But somebody
Who
did.
was? I know that the district manager was Danny Simpkin,
Oh, yeah.
but I'm trying to think of the guy before Danny. Old guy, Kenny somebody. I don't remember, but my first show, the first time I was involved with New York, with this guy was there. But yeah, once we moved to the Javits Center, it wasn't so bad. But we were at the Coliseum and the Armory, and yeah, it was pretty challenging. But a lot of a lot of the shows were in challenging places. I remember I was in Cleveland once, and we were, different shows had different rules on how much gasoline you could have in a car and all this kind of stuff.
Oh, yeah, right.
And we were going into Cleveland, and it was in the basement in like some civic center or something. And the fire marshal was there, and if you had too much gasoline, they had like a pump siphon, and they had 55-gallon drums of gasoline, and gasoline sloshed all over every place. And I'm saying, this is safe? So anyway, we get in, and I got one car that's just a little bit over, right? And this big fire marshal there, and he said, well, you got to take some out. And I said, this is a real challenge for me, because I work for Saab Scania of America, and that's a wholly owned subsidiary of Saab Sweden. And by the federal EPA, it's illegal for me to release raw hydrocarbons into the atmosphere. And this guy kind of rolls back on his heels. The way it was. I mean, I mentioned Red Rambo earlier. I mean, he'd set up things, and we'd put resistors in the fuel, in the fuel gauges, and it's crazy stuff. Just crazy stuff.
Was it the same cars trucked to show to show to show, or are they all locally sourced?
No, locally sourced. The only time you truck them, I mean, there were a few manufacturers that truck stuff, but for the most part, unless you had something like the concept car turbo or the EV1, which we had, which made a very short life. I was surprised that car had such a short life, because it was a really, really cool little car. I mean, really cool little car. It would have been a tremendous replacement for the Sonnet, because it was a 16 valve 2-liter, glass top. It was a wonderful little car. But unless you had that, or you had something like when the first GLEs came in and there was just a limited number, maybe at that point you'd truck them, because we were doing stuff like we'd peel paint cars to have them in different ads. I mean, we might have had one GLE, and we'd peel paint it 2 or 3 different colors.
Wow.
In a period of 3 or 4 days, just so it looked like we had cars. So kind of like Carl Shelby in the day.
When you say peel paint, I'm not exactly sure what you're talking about, repainting or stripping the paint?
No, it's a peel paint. Peel paint was like a latex kind of paint.
Oh, sort of like a wrap almost.
Yeah,
right?
it was. Okay. Well, it was like a wrap. Yeah, today you'd use a wrap, but it was an actual paint product, and you'd never want to do a detail shot. It was always long camera, that kind of stuff. But we'd be shooting up in Maine, and be rolling through all the foliage and countryside, and from a distance, the wheels were sparkling, and it worked. So
Cool. Going back to your letter, you sent me some of the other side projects you were on. Tell me all about the National Peace Officer ski race.
So
how did that come to be?
I don't know when they first started to use them, but Saab was one of the first front-wheel drive cars out there. I mean, maybe some DKWs and some other stuff, but I mean, it was the first car, and particularly when the police in Aspen and Pitkin County used Saabs as police cars. And I'll send you some photos. I got some pretty good photos of the police cars. I mean, they had 18, 20 Saabs, all kind of blue and dress. And I spent a lot of time out there. Bill Miles, Kenny Grauberger, and we were out there once, and there was a guy by the name of Billy Perea, who I think had some relationship with the Force and with Saab and dealer, or maybe he had a relationship with Eric Heidman Pontiac, or Tom Heidman Pontiac. And so we kind of kicked this idea around of having a National Peace Officers race. And so there was a Swede in Winter Park, guy by the name of Otto Taschuti. And so we talked to Otto, and we put a plan together and presented it to the national office, and they liked it. And so we had the first National Peace Officers race, and it ran for 12 years. And it was one of Sten's pets.
Okay.
It was one of Sten's pets. He's a Swede. Sten was a great skier. I mean,
oh, really?
Great skier. Great skier. I mean, he was tall, 6'2" or something like that. I mean, he'd go down the mountain. I mean, perfect parallel skiing, 2 inches apart. It was sickening. It was sickening.
Yeah.
But Sten loved it. So again, that was kind of my backroom relationship with Sten, because I'd get him. I mean, every year for 12 years, I'd go to Winter Park or Snowmass or Aspen for 2 weeks and ski on company money. It was a great deal. It was a beautiful deal. No matter what position I had, the ski race always managed to find a way to stay with me. So,
where did the officers come from? All over or locally?
Yeah,
or?
all over the place. All over the place. Yeah, I mean, we had officers from the North Haven Police Department, Connecticut. We had officers from California. Big group from Dallas, Minneapolis. I don't know. I still have quite a few badges, not badges, but the embroidered patches, because that's what they'd exchange. They'd exchange embroidered passes. I still have quite a few of them, but it was so much fun. I mean, these guys, and Sten loved it. I mean, he was so good with the officers. He'd spend all the time. He was so relaxed. There was no pressure. It was such a great event. It was really such a great event. But we'd have a couple hundred officers there.
Oh, that many?
Yeah. Oh, yeah, it's big.
I've seen a couple of pictures, group posing with police cars that were officers.
Right.
And then there's a famous picture that I've seen for years, and you're in it with the cast of the TV show Hill Street Blues.
Oh yeah,
Now,
yeah.
how did was that related to that event? They were there because
Absolutely.
they were all
Yeah.
playing officers on
Yeah,
TV.
yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. We had the first event we had Sonny Bono and George Hamilton. They were our guests. And then the second through maybe the fifth or sixth, it was the Hill Street people. I mean, it was Joe Spano, Dennis France, and Betty Thompson. And
Thomas.
Thomas, yeah.
Yeah.
They loved the Cops. I mean, it was so good for them because they were getting real stories.
Oh,
you
right,
know?
right.
And I mean, it was just a wonderful. Dan Marino was there one year, and I mean, it was a who's who.
Yeah, yeah.
And
Well, that can lead us into one of my questions I always ask is about your brushes with celebrity or greatness in your career. Of course, that's obviously one of them. Were there any other celebs or sports figures that you spent any time with at Saab, or even after Saab?
yeah, when you asked me that, I did. Let's see. I wrote them down because I was thinking about it. Sonny Bono, George Hamilton, Hill Street Gang, Spano, Dennis, Betty, Dan Marino, Eric Carlson, different kind of celeb, but I knew Eric quite well because I'd go to these international shows, and Eric would always be there. I remember the first time I met Eric was probably 76, and we were doing something at the old Stardust racetrack in Vegas, old racetrack down by the Strip, and the event was over, and so I said, Eric, can you give me a ride? And so we're in this EMS, and the event had finished, so most of the field staff, it was probably some kind of a gymkhana where they had 1,000 cones in the middle of the racetrack. So Eric, we start around the track, and we're going around, and we're doing whatever the top speed of an EMS was at that point, maybe 102, 103 miles an hour. I mean, we come out of the turn 3, and I don't know, half a mile, quarter mile ahead, there's probably 8 or 10 field guys in the track pulling up cones. Eric never lifted his foot.
Yes.
He just says, "Yeah, I hope they know what they're doing," and boom, right through the middle of them. I mean, yeah. But I don't know whether you ever met Eric, but that's the kind of guy he was. He was such a nice man, and I mean,
because I think he was at the Waterville, New Hampshire New 95 intro, and I was there. Shook his hand there.
Yeah, he was. Nothing was sacred to Eric. I mean, he'd go to these auto shows and the narrators and these girls. Oh my God, the things he'd say to them.
No, I've heard the stories.
Oh my God, it was hysterical. I mean, hysterical. Saw Eric Sterling Moss because Eric was married to Sterling's sister.
Oh, okay.
So Sterling Moss, after I left Saab, I was involved with some other things which we'll eventually get to. But when I met Carol Shelby a number of times. Actually had dinner with Carol Shelby one night in Louisiana, which was a wonderful evening.
Yeah.
Don Henley from the Eagles spent a lot of time with Lord March of all the Goodwood fame.
Okay.
So Lord March we set up some stuff for the first Goodwood revival. And spent an awful lot of time with him. But yeah, I mean, Gatlin Brothers, when we were in Nashville, they were the entertainment. They were the entertainment,
weren't they?
Which almost didn't happen because their writer said they had to be on stage within, I think they were supposed to come out at 8 o'clock or something, and the writer was they had to come out within X amount of minutes of that time. And I forget who was the head of Saab AB at that point, but some Sweden. He's at the mic. He's at the podium, and it just yangle yangle, and I mean Rossi, because I think the main team at that was Stephen, Valerie, and myself. And we're the blue suit dinner. It's all done. The entertainment's ready, and this guy's just going on and on and on and on and on. And I'm sitting there with Stephen saying, "We got to get this guy off of there." I said, "I don't know what you're gonna," because I had to do something else. I had something else that was my responsibility. I said, "Stephen, if you got to get a hook, you got to get him going." Because these guys, we got word from the back room that if they weren't on stage in 2 minutes, they were out of here.
Wow.
Oh yeah, it was that bad. And I forget what Stephen did, but if you talk to him, he'd remember it, because I mean he's big to begin with, and he's kind of low crawling in front of the podium, and and it finally worked by seconds.
Yeah.
So,
I wonder if there's video of that meeting. I don't know if they ever made one. I never saw it.
I don't know. I would hope so. It was a great meeting. I mean, that was
said.
really, really a good meeting. I mean, we did so much at that meeting. It was at Operaland, and it was a big facility, but they were so willing to do anything. They were such a great partner to work with, because we built a whole dealership in one of the conference rooms, or the convention area. I mean, we had a electric garage door for the dealers to go through to go into
Oh
it.
my God.
Service bays. Oh, it was phenomenal.
Wow.
We had, at the end, once all the dealers had left, we had a board meeting, I think it was. And after the board meeting, were you there? Did you go to that?
Not at that one, no.
Oh, that's too bad. But in the middle of Operaland, it was a big atrium, and it was beautiful. It had waterfalls and all this. And there was an area overlooking where the dealer dinner was going to be. We had special plates made and all kinds of crazy. I mean, we spent money like drunken sailors on shore leave. But so I'm talking to the people at the hotel, and I said, okay, well, like, on this rock, which was kind of high, I said, at a given moment, can we illuminate a Saab Scania logo? Oh, yeah, no problem. I said, but then, can we have a boom, a big boom? Mm-hmm. So, oh, we'd never done that. We're not sure the glass in the atrium will come down. And they did the research, and they said, we're pretty sure it won't. So, they had this meeting. They had the board meeting, and all the Swedes and all the important people and came out, and they had their dinner. And I forget what the key was, but the Saab Scania logo lit up, and then kaboom! And I mean, all the rooms that were facing the atrium of the hotel, which hundreds probably, I don't remember. But a lot of them were out on the balcony anyway, because we had music and all kinds of stuff going on. And when the boom went off, there was a lot of people that kind of questioned what was going to happen next, including the whole hotel staff. Is the sky falling? But it was great.
I don't think I ever heard that story.
Oh yeah, but it was when people did things. I mean, you challenge them and they did things. Now you say, well, let's do that. Oh, we couldn't do that. It's just automatic no on everything. I mean, we had so much fun because we never stopped at the limit. We always tried to move the limit, and it paid off. And a lot of places benefited because the next group that came in, they had a better deal.
Some of the other things you did, you mentioned about the many Saab owner conventions, and
oh God, yeah.
I mean, I'm sure there's a million. That's probably a whole other podcast.
yeah, we did. I did a lot of them. I mean, and I enjoyed them for the most part. I mean, the one that stands out in my mind, probably the two that stand out in my mind most significantly were, I think it was '87. We had an owners convention in Carlisle. Guy by the name of Bill Jenkins, Dr. Bill Jenkins, great guy. I just saw him last year as well. I was out in Gettysburg and saw him. But we had this meeting, and we had just gotten from Sweden the orange Sonnet 1 and the green 92 that were in the lobby forever. I mean, they had just arrived like a day or two before. And so we had them out at the meeting because I think we had a prototype convertible there as well. So, but that was a great meeting. But it all turned upside down because there was a big internal Saab club. I don't know what the whole. It was about the Saab publication that had it, and he was trying to sell it to. He was trying to make money, and it was so. During the last dinner, when they were doing announcements and giving prizes, it comes up and there's a big explosion because they're basically just clawing each other's eyeballs out on the stage. And when I was going through the papers I saw something, and it was a note that was written on something by Sinclair to me about the convention, and it said that he was sitting with Eric, and Eric, his comment was, "What a bloody fool!" This guy on the stage was, but but the conventions were fun. I mean, the Saab owners, they were for the most part, they were pretty good people.
Yeah, it was being in the jobs that I did, you heard a lot of negativity, and it was nice to go to a convention. It was all positive, at least. You heard from the people that just loved their product. Where was the 87 convention? Do you remember?
Carlisle.
Carlisle, that's right. I think I was there, but not officially, for an afternoon, I think, to see the cars. And what you said, there was a second one you really enjoyed.
Yeah, I think that was 2009, and that was in either Denver or Winter Park, or I think it was probably in Winter Park, just outside of Denver. But, that was the convention where Sten was at, and we had convinced Sten to come. I think it was 2009. Yeah, August of 2009. I'd left the company. I had been gone from the company for quite some time, but I forget who reached out to me. Somebody had reached out to me, and so I reached out to Sten. Because even after both of us had left the company, we communicate from time to time, and really encouraged him to come. And like I said, that may have been the last time he did anything publicly for Saab. Mm-hmm. So a lot of water under the bridge since then. Yeah. But I've just been busy since I found these two DVDs, so I haven't even looked at them myself. But I'll send them to you so you can take a look at them. But again, he'd been gone from Saab, God, at that point, years. 18, 19 years maybe. But he was still good. He still loved the people. He still loved the product. So it was good. But I'd been a lot of conventions and rallies and
they're endless.
Endless.
Yeah, we had to unload tractor trailers and in the tents selling parts, and they were usually a good event. It sure got rid of a lot of excess inventory and T-shirts and floor mats and everything that we had.
Yeah.
In your email, you also talked about develop some of the historic vehicles. I didn't understand that. What was that about?
Well, when I came to Saab, I mean, we were still off 95 at the Saab building there, the white building, exit 41, and we had this beautiful lawn out front, and nothing on it ever. And so I worked with, at that point, I think her name was Cindy Tortellini. I think she was the manager of the facilities. And I said, Cindy, let's put a couple mounds out here so we can throw products out. Everybody sees the name Saab, but they don't see anything, and Saab Scania. So we had, we'd rotate Saab cars out there, and I think we had a Scania truck or two, because we had some day trucks in the Northeast for a little while, trucks that would leave and come home every night so they could be serviced. I don't think we ever had a bus out there. They were too big. Yeah. But then inside, we had an area when you first walked into the door, and like I said, we had acquired the orange Sonnet 1. We had acquired that green 92. when Barber Saab Racing came on, I worked with Stephen and Skip Barber and found a chassis that had been tweaked a little bit. And with enough warranty parts and everything else, we made a non-op race car. And so that was in the lobby. And we used it at a lot of dealer meetings and dealer events. We had a series of regional dealer meetings. It might have been when we were promoting the Barber Saab as some kind of a tool for the dealers to use. But for whatever reason, we had the Barber Saab car at these meetings, and the Central Region meeting, we had it in Dallas at DFW, and we had to get this Barber Saab race car I think we must have put it in the lobby. And so anyway, the only way to get it there was to put a tow rope on it, and we towed it through DFW behind a Saab 900 at that point probably to the hotel. And so I'm sitting there in this Barber Saab car. Fortunately, it was tight enough that it would roll, and I don't think it stopped. I don't think it had brakes. But,
oh my gosh.
Yeah. So I'm basically driving with all these lunatics in DFW traffic in this Formula race.
Oh my gosh.
Which was kind of fun and funny. But we did that. The long run cars, when we had finished the long run, there were 3 cars, I think, that did the long run. One of them went to Sweden. I forget where the second one went. But the third car, the number 3 car, was just out there. And so it was our Pete Lonergan had it. And the car was, I won't say it was shot, but, it spent all this time gone left. So the suspension was pretty much tired. All the components were pretty much tired. And so I talked him out of it, and then had the shop downstairs put all new suspension parts and that kind of stuff in it. And we used it for several years as an auto show car, as a dealer event car, and that kind of stuff. So, and there were a couple other things that that we worked with to try to save and to have done. But yeah,
I think the Talladega car, maybe it was toward the end of its life, wound up in the Meriden lobby for a while.
Oh yeah,
absolutely. I
absolutely.
remember looking at it closely there.
Yeah, it was towards the end of its life, but it had been refurbished because it was.
Oh really?
Yeah. I mean, not exterior wise, no, not at all. But suspension was redone and that kind of stuff, because there were times I'd get it and I'd have to move it into a show or something like that. So I needed something that was drivable and stop and that stuff. So we spent.
I wonder where that is now. Is it out at the museum in South Dakota? I don't know. I don't think so.
Maybe. I don't know where it ended up. I know the car one, I think, is in Sweden at Trollhättan.
Right.
I don't know. I'll see next year. I'm going to some. They've drafted me to be at some event next June. I don't know what it is. There's some global event June 3rd and 4th or something. So I don't know. They asked me
at the museum.
Yeah,
at the museum. Okay, cool.
So,
and one thing I didn't know that you worked with Scania bus and the friction tester at industry shows.
Absolutely.
How do you transition from cars to buses like that?
Ralph Miller.
Okay.
Ralph Miller.
Interesting. Okay.
Ralph, you need help with your bags? Absolutely.
Yeah.
So when the friction tester, and I forget the guy's name, it was a really nice young guy.
Kent Handestam.
Yeah, nice young
Kent?
guy.
Yeah, great guy. Yeah, I'm trying to get him on the show.
Yeah, so I forget where he was. He did it. There were a couple aeronautic events or airport facility events that I helped, because what I do is I had show properties. Most of the things there, they were cars on carpet. They didn't have any. I mean, they'd have a pop-up sign and that kind of stuff. I had national show properties that I'd put the friction tester on, the same properties that were used in the auto shows. I got a couple of pictures that I'll send you. And the Scania part, I did a couple of things with trucks, with the come home trucks, and because somewhere in my Swedish travels, or maybe it was with Björn Westerling, I don't really remember where the connection came, but I got involved with the PR guy from Scania in Sweden. We crossed paths somewhere and had an aquavit or two, and so we had a good communication. And whenever he needed something, he'd just call me and say, "Hey, can you handle this for me?" So I did that. Probably the most exciting thing I ever did with Scania. There was when they were making the buses, when they had the bus facility in
I
Orange.
toured that once. Yeah.
It was a cool place. I mean, it's a shame that they backed out of that. But there was a big show in, I think, San Francisco, and they were trying to, present the buses so that they told a story. And so when the buses came, they were only a little longer than a car, because it was the back pusher half and the front steering half bolted together, and then all the umbilicals, the electrical, the brakes, the air, all that stuff was just coiled up in the middle. And when they'd get them in the factory, they'd unbolt them and basically uncoil those various lines, jig them into position, and then they'd start to build the framework of the body from there. So the idea I came up with, and they ultimately bought, was that on the far side, and I don't have a picture of the show, but I got a picture of the scale model that I built of what the stand would look like, and it was an interesting challenge to, out of foam core, make a 53-foot Scania bus and detail it out and everything, so the Swedes could understand what I was trying to do. But we had a finished bus, all done, interior painted, everything else, and then like 6 feet from that, we had the nose and the pusher, and the wheels were in line, and all the umbilicals were under a kind of a walkover, and then we had a couple of Saab car. I think we had a convertible and 2 or 3 other things on the stand. So it really was a nice display, again, because of the connection with Saab automobiles and the availability of product, of display properties that most people didn't have. It was a very, very nice stand. I wish I had I haven't been able to find a picture of it. I was very proud of it, actually. So.
Yeah, that wasn't it? There was a percentage of the vehicle had to be assembled or produced in the United States, and then they changed the rules. They made it a bigger percentage, and they couldn't compete, and that was the end of that.
Yeah,
but I think I mentioned it. That's just what I was going to say.
Yeah. Hawaii had a big order. Yeah, Hawaii had a big order.
If you were back then, everybody watched Magnum PI. There's a couple of episodes when a Scania bus goes by.
Yeah, absolutely. I've ridden Scania buses in Hawaii for sure.
Yeah, and then they had like contracts in some strange place, like the middle of Iowa. Maybe it was Iowa City somewhere, and then
some oddball places. The bus was competitive. I mean, it was pretty interesting, the assembly plant there. I mean, the thing that I was always envious, being a car guy, and I've restored quite a few cars over the years, they had a sandblasting chamber that was probably 10 feet tall and 10 or 12 feet wide and 40 feet long, because when they build this, they'd weld this frame out of whatever it was, probably 1.5 inch square tubing or something like that. And when it was all done, they'd take it in and sandblast it. So they'd blast all the scale and everything off of it, and then it would go to the paint and rust preventive, and then they'd basically start building. They'd attach the front and rear and start building it up from them. But it was quite a nice facility, and it was very compact for what they were.
Yeah,
making.
it wasn't
Yeah.
super
Wasn't
huge
huge.
that I remember. Yeah.
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 Yeah. It's right over by the Pez factory, as I recall.
Oh yeah, that's right. I forgot about that. Right
Yeah.
next to it, I
Right
think.
next to the
Yeah.
Pez factory.
Pez was in New Haven or Orange,
Yeah.
whatever that
Yeah.
was. Yeah.
Yeah. I
Oh,
think it
that's
was
funny.
Orange still. Yeah.
Well, you've got a better memory, and I thought I had a good memory, so that's funny. All these things come flooding back. That's
Yeah.
great.
Yeah.
So tell me about, sadly, the end of the time at Saab. That was
Well,
91, was it? When they,
yeah, it probably started a little bit before that. It was funny. I mean, the second floor of the Orange office was it was essentially a bullpen, and there were offices around the exterior.
yeah.
On the back side was the warehouse and restrooms and that kind of stuff. But on this side, Sten's office and Bob's office and Andy Lugris, and you just go down the line, Ken Adams, and the middle was just cubicles.
Mm-hmm.
And probably a couple times, but probably after GM bought the first half, things changed a little bit. They changed a little bit, not drastically, because Mike Powerhouse, who was service training and I was sales training, we thought we could possibly gain some value and be able to get some dealer development programs from GM. I mean, we just didn't have the budget for it.
Yeah.
It wasn't about skill or the ability to administer. We just didn't have the budget to develop it. So consequently, the best we ever did was technician training, maybe a little bit of service manager training, and sales training. I mean, we never really got into sales manager training, never got into dealer development. I mean, which was unfortunate.
Yeah.
We
I
just
remember about that time going to parts manager training. You're always in a hotel somewhere.
right. Yeah.
And those were quite illuminating, shall we
Right.
say.
But
amazing how many different styles of operating,
yeah,
for sure.
so, but we thought we could maybe not lean on. I don't want to project a negative, but we thought maybe we could find a resource that we could change the name. I mean, from GM to Saab, and boom. I mean, a dealer's a dealer's a dealer to a dealer. They all have the same issues. And so Mike and I went to Detroit one time, and it was when they were still at the original GM center, and God, we went into this mahogany room that was, I mean, you could have taken the nicotine off the walls with a scraper. Because it had been there since the 30s or maybe the 20s. I don't know when they first moved in. And it was like 15 people in the room, and it was a big rectangular table. There was a guy at the end, and then there were like 8 guys on either side. And if you'd ask a question, the guy on the end would acknowledge the question, and then it would just go in pecking order, boom, 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 until somebody knew an answer. And then they'd give you whatever the answer was. And it was, I remember we asked one question, and it must have been this guy's passion, because he just answered it. Mm-hmm. And then he spent more time apologizing to the 12 people that he'd jumped in front of than he did answering the question. And I thought,
yeah, I only got to go out there twice, and it was enlightening. It was so different.
So different.
When you're used to the small, just get it done kind of way of doing business,
Right.
and people were flabbergasted about all the different things I was able to do, or could do, or was responsible for.
Yeah,
and they just were shut. What do you mean you make keys as well? I had no clue.
God, I mean. Yeah, I tell people ask, what was it like at Saab? And I say, I wore so many hats. Sometimes I'd wear sometimes 5 hats in one day.
Yeah.
And had I been with my attitude and level of education, I probably never would have got out of the warehouse at GM. Because that's just the way it was. But I was lucky. I worked hard. I worked hard, and gone in and seeing STEM. I wasn't afraid to speak up about the product, about whatever.
Yeah.
Some people didn't care much for that, but so be it.
Yeah. So that was, you said you stayed around a little bit
Yeah.
into 92.
Yeah. So anyway, going back to the question, somewhere in the probably in 1990, when you're in the cubicle world, you start to see certain doors being shut, and that's never a good thing. When a certain combination of doors are shut at the same time, you learn that that's not a good thing. Something not good is happening. So we started to see that, and there was a little bit of turnover, and they restructured a little bit here and there. And I found an internal I found something that I just sent to my file. I didn't send it to anybody. I just sent it to my file because they must have changed the terminology of something, and so I just wrote a file that, to myself, so that if I ever needed it, I'd have that recollection. So things were changing, and right before the D-Day,
Yeah.
there was scuttled that I think it was there was something happening to 13 people. Oh, I mean, we all thought they were getting fired.
Yeah.
Joke was on us because they were the ones that were staying. But
Right.
it was, in a little bit of it, I go back to Stan and Kelly. Most of the 13 people that stayed as this core group were Eastern Region guys
Yeah.
at one point or another. And that's just the way the cookie crumbles. But so anyway, on the day of reckoning, a guy by the name of Hans Holbrook comes in, and German, sausage-fingered little German man, and without much finesse or anything, just basically, I mean, we were all assembled. I forget whether we were in the lobby or in the cafeteria.
Yeah, I remember I was there. I came down from Meredith.
Yeah.
But
But I mean,
remember.
essentially just said, we're closing the Orange facility. There will be someone to talk about your compensation package, and some of you will be asked if you want to relocate to Atlanta.
Yeah.
And that was pretty much it.
Yeah.
It was not it was just jaw-dropping.
Yeah.
I mean, because there's most of the people there, I was the exception to the rule because I didn't grow up in Connecticut, but 95% of the people there were from Orange or New Haven
Right.
or North Haven
Right.
or somewhere. They'd never known anything else.
Sure.
They'd worked hard. They'd been there. They were good troopers, and boom, here comes a German, and just, I mean, literally pulled the rug out from under them, and they were shell shocked. I mean, shell shocked. So
I remember even to this day the interviews on, I think it was WTNH, the local TV show or TV channel in New Haven, as people were driving out, and it was exactly what you're describing. People were total shock,
devastated. I mean, devastated.
Yeah,
because you had a company, not
right.
a group. It wasn't like we disbanded the sales group or the service group or the parts group. I mean, the company.
Yeah.
Gone.
And there had been a couple of years of layoffs leading up to that, so I think
A little
everybody
bit,
thought it would be just another layoff or something.
Yeah,
but it
right.
wasn't
Yeah,
the
there'd
case.
been some layoffs, but I mean, because we'd gone through this growth, and then we hit things like the gas shortage and some of these odds and ends kinds of things. So there was it wasn't a total surprise to a lot of people that their job maybe was in danger.
Mm-hmm.
But it was a total surprise that everyone's job was eliminated
Yeah.
in 5 minutes.
Yeah.
That was just devastating. So,
Yeah.
long story short of that, so I mentioned Delia Bernardi earlier. Her and I were married in 1988. We have this conversation with Hans Holbrook, fires everybody. I go home. At that point, I was 41 years old. She was younger than I am by about 13 years. Mm-hmm. And she says, I'm pregnant. I said, oh, this is a fucking great day, huh? Pardon my French, but I get fired at noon, and at 41, I get my first child at 6 o'clock. So So I went in the next day or two, or whenever it was. I was one of the people that they had asked to come in, to relocate to Atlanta. And I think there was a time gap between that, because I know that they must have been setting. I don't remember. It was a really kind of a strange period, but there must have been a time gap of a week or two. So I was in that time gap. It was in the fall, so I had meetings scheduled in Detroit with George P. Johnson, who was my vendor for the auto shows, because we still had auto shows going on, and I had a meeting scheduled to go out and talk about the fall and the winter plan and that kind of stuff. And so I went to Detroit, and I was having lunch with Bob and Larry Valley, who were, at that point, George P. was a solely owned company by Robert Valley, and Bob and Larry were his sons. So we're having lunch, and they had heard the news, obviously, and they said, "So what are you going to do?" And I said, I'm not worried about it. I've got some interviews in Atlanta if I want to take them, and blah, blah, blah. And they said, "Well, do you ever consider working for us?" And I said, "Show me the money." Mm-hmm. Not until right now. So we had that brief conversation. I go back to Connecticut. There was a Swede, Jan Oki something. I forget his last name. And he was the one that was interviewing people for Atlanta. So I go in, and I think Bob Stogsdale wanted me to do something. There were 3 different opportunities that I could have applied for. And so I go in with Jan Oki, and I'd met him, I knew him, and we start talking. And basically, he started to articulate that all this was basically because of all the people in Connecticut. That the 300 or whatever number was, they created all this challenge and the reduced sales and all this kind of stuff. And I looked at him and I said, "John Oki, I was pretty much undecided what I was going to do. But for you to, after working here for 18 years, for you to imply that it was the people that were pulling the wagon and not the guys steering it, that not only is offensive, but it's totally inaccurate. So I'll pass."
Wow.
Have a nice day. So then I flew out to Detroit, and then I had to meet Mr. Valley, who I'd known, because if I'd go out for a meeting, he'd always have a cocktail with us. He'd never have dinner with us. So I knew him, and when the boys said, "Well, you have to talk to Mr. Valley if you're going to come to work for us." So at that point, we're kind of jumping ahead to afterlife, but yeah, it all ties together. Yeah. They said, "Well, you have to meet with Mr. Valley," and the George P. Johnson Company, they're kind of a conservative organization. Everybody's on a Mr. Miller, Mr. Valley name basis, suit and tie every day, and we're kind of conservative when it comes to hair and face hair. Like,
jeez,
yeah. But I said, okay. So I said, "So you might want to make an adjustment or two." And I said, "Well, we'll see. Well, maybe I will, maybe I won't. I don't know." I wasn't really concerned about it because there was still BMW and Subaru and Mercedes on the East Coast. So, I mean, I wasn't really that concerned. I had committed to stay until the Orange office was closed because they gave you a year's pay in addition to paying you up until the day it closed. So I said, "Well, that's a no-brainer." Unless I found something else that I had to start at right away. Mm-hmm. So I have my interview set up with Mr. Valley, and I might have trimmed 1/8 of an inch off my beard and my hair. And I went in and we're talking, and like I said, I knew him, and he eventually says, "Well, Mr. Miller, George P. Johnson Company's a pretty conservative company. We don't beards and facial hair and long hair and that kind of stuff." And I said, I mean, kind of like when I met with Sten. I said, Mr. Valley, it never seemed to bother you when I was a client and you were taking our money.
Mm-hmm.
I said, and the second thing, I know that you fought in the Korean War and I fought in the Vietnam War, and we both fought for freedom. And this is my freedom. And he sat there for a minute and he said, welcome to the George B. Johnson Company.
Wow.
And several years later, when I actually went to Europe as an expat for it, I came home and the Valley boys had a younger sister, and I was meeting one of them, and his younger sister, who had never met, come in. And we're talking, and she asked her brother, said, who is he? And she says, oh, he's Arsey Miller. She says, what's he do? He says, well, he works for the company in Europe. And she looked at me and says, there's no way he works for my father. Because I probably didn't look much different than I do now. So
yeah. And how long did you work for them?
I worked for them for almost 20 years.
Wow.
Yeah, I did. So I started, when I left Saab, I took Saab auto show business with me, and for 6 months or so, I did all the auto show stuff. Still, Vincent Donroe, who eventually took it over, he was just starting. He had a couple other responsibilities, but I was basically running it remote. And about 6 months in, we had won the international contract for all the shows, events, exhibits for Chrysler, Jeep, and Dodge outside the U.S., and the account executive that did it went to one show in Russia. There was a show in Moscow, and he just freaked out. I mean, because there's 20,000 people. You don't understand a word they're saying. You can't read anything. You don't know what you're eating, and it's challenging. I mean, it's not easy. And so he came back and said, I'm done. I'll stay with the company, but I'm never going outside the U.S. on business again. And I came because I had been to Birmingham and Paris and Frankfurt and Geneva and a lot of international shows. And in 1992 or early 93, I was probably one of the few people that had a passport. I mean, everybody's got one now, but in the 90s, nobody had a passport.
Yeah.
And they said, you want to do this? And I said, yeah, why not? So I did the first Frankfurt show for Chrysler, Jeep, and Dodge through George B. Johnson in 93. And then in 96, they decentralized and put all the European operations in Belgium, the Asian operations in Japan, and the rest of the world was still out of Detroit. But so in 96, I packed up the family and moved to Belgium and stayed in Europe for 6 years.
Wow.
4 years in Belgium, and then when the Daimler-Chrysler Bird merger happened, I moved to Stuttgart and was in Stuttgart for 2 more years. But I've done shows and events on every continent with the exception of Antarctica.
Jeez, amazing.
Yeah,
amazing.
Amazing.
I mean, what a career!
Amazing.
I mean, oh my God!
Yeah. You know. Someplace you asked, I forget what it was. The question, and if your readers or your viewers don't know, you sent me just an outline, but it said something about what was your best day or something, and the answer I wrote down, because I typed answers just to get it in my head.
Yeah.
My answer was every day.
Wow.
Every day.
Good answer.
Every day.
Yeah.
So, and I think in the email I sent you, it was like the line in Fury, best job I ever had, until I went to the next one. But I've been lucky. I mean, I say lucky. I've worked really hard. I've foregone a lot of personal things because when you're in China, you're in China. There's not much you're going to do. You can't go to the local PTA meeting. You can't go to the baseball game or the lacrosse game or whatever. So I've had a lot of fun. I've seen a lot of things. You know, unlike a lot of travelers, when I traveled, I always tried to have a day on the front or the back.
Me too.
Just to experience where I was.
Yep. Yeah.
You know, and
And I was amazed at the number of people that don't do that. I was like, what are you, crazy? The company paid to get you here.
Absolutely.
Enjoy it.
I skied my first time when I was probably 30 years old. I was walking through O'Hare on Friday night, coming back from Denver, when people were walking towards the plane that had just spent money to get there.
Mm-hmm.
And I said, wait a minute, there's something wrong with this picture.
Yeah.
You know? So I did that, and very, very, very seldom took pictures because, you know, I kind of, when I first started, I said, I don't want to see the world through a camera.
Mm-hmm.
You know,
Get the memories.
I very, very seldom took pictures, even when I had phones, because it's not the same. I mean, I show somebody a picture, and they can't absorb the smell and the atmosphere and the flavor of the people. But I love the international world. It's
great.
The fact that I couldn't read anything. I mean, dyslexic, I can't read anyway, so it's different. Whether it's English or Chinese, it's all the same. But
and
you know,
we've got Google Translate, and pointed at a sign, it changes to English. So.
When I did it, it was pretty raw still. I mean, in the early '90s, I remember being on the Great Wall, and there was a older Chinese woman, and she was just fascinated with me, you know, because I may have been the first round eye she'd ever seen. I mean, she just could. I mean, it was like touching me. It was, but it was great. I mean, I loved it. I had so many great experiences, saw so much, and but you know, like I said, I'm not afraid of much of anything. I was in the 101st Airborne, and at that point it was Air Mobile. It was all helicopters, and it always bothered me being in the 101st Airborne and never jumping out of an airplane. So I was out in California. God, it was probably 2017, 18, somewhere in there. And I booked a jump on Saturday morning, like on Thursday, and paid for it, which was the smartest thing, because if I had to pay for it on Saturday when I went, I probably wouldn't have gone. But yeah, I jumped out of a plane, and you know, so much fun. It was cool. Yeah, it's cool.
I haven't had that desire in life, but
it was. I mean, I'll try anything once.
Yeah, good for you.
Something's going to get me.
Yeah,
might as well be fun.
Yeah, I'm jealous on your outlook on life. That's great.
Yeah, but I attribute it a lot to the military. And I tell people all the time, I say, what the military taught me in the first week of basic was right foot, left foot, right foot, left foot, right foot, left foot. And as long as you keep going forward, it might not be exactly what you want, but you don't have time to dwell on the past, because nothing happens in the past. You can't change it. I mean, it's nice to talk about the past and sob and reminisce, and faces come into my brain, and I'll laugh here and I'll laugh there, and for the most part, I worked with great people, Valerie and Heather and Stan and Bob, but a lot of good Swedes. I still have one Swede, Dan Repmark, who really was instrumental in bringing sales training to a usable level, because most of the time I'd go to Sweden and I'd be there for a week, and I'd to quote unquote develop the training package for the next year, and Friday morning they'd roll out this thing that was all completed weeks before, and I'd say, why am I here? And I'd say, well, how many do you want? And I say, how many do I have to buy? And they'd give me a number, and I say, okay. I said, just take them to the dock, and whether the boat's there or not, just push them in, because they're useless to me. They'd have stuff about roll-up windows in the back of the cars, and so it just doesn't happen. And Dan realized that, we were a substantial part of the market, and there was a lot of good stuff they had. They had all the cutaways and this and that. So we got to the point where they'd do all the color and all the renderings and all the cutaways, and I'd print all the black stuff. So it was all in color, wasn't spelled with a U, and we didn't talk about roll-up windows and no tires with Ys. So it was a good relationship. He helped change a lot of what we got that was usable. Still still a very good friend of mine. I probably still talk to him once a week. So.
Well, it's great that you stay in touch with so many, and so many people said to me, said, "Oh, you have to talk to Arsey, no matter what you do in this podcast." You've kind of touched on all of many. Your closing thoughts. Is there any last comments and thoughts you'd like to share?
I miss all the co-workers.
Yeah.
We lost a lot of people.
Oh, I'm sorry. Yeah, I forgot that question.
For me, most of the people I started with were already in their 40s and 50s when I was 20. So, I mean, hardly anybody that I worked with in the central region is still around. I mean, Rich, there's a couple of service guys still around. I think Fred Lynn's still around. Rafer Kushner, I see him pop up. Arnie Mielda's still, I see stuff from him every once in a while. Dave Shirk, Stephen, Valerie, Dan. It was interesting, the last convention we were at, you were there, I think, weren't you? The last one we had just a couple of years ago. But anyway,
no, I was 2011 was the last.
Oh, okay.
I'm trying for next year.
We were there, and it was funny because I talked to Stephen and Valerie, and I said, we come in and we do this and we do that. And I said, but some of these people, and a lot of the people that are there are from the eastern region. There's a few people that drib and drab from the other regions, but I said, a lot of people don't know what any of these people did. Yeah. They see a face and, hi, I'm John, I'm Arsey, I'm Ted, Sally, whoever. I said, but there's no, what did you do? And I said to Valerie and Stephen, I said, I think we should go around the room and just have everyone stand up and introduce themselves and give a little overview of what they did. I said, hopefully some people don't like to stand up and public speak. John, these guys started standing up, and I didn't think we'd get out of there by midnight. They were going on, and it was wonderful. I mean, it was so good because it was like somebody cared about what you brought to the Saab party. It was so good. I hope they do it again the next time.
Yeah, I heard the story that it was a popular part of
it was so well done. I mean, I just didn't know the domino effect that we were going to start. I forget. Maybe it was Sokol that was the first one up, and when he talked pretty easily. So the guy next said, well, if he can do it, I can. It kind of snowballed from there. But it was great. So good. Other than that, I don't know. It's like I said, life's been good. When I left George P., I still continued to do some work for Chrysler, Jeep, and Dodge on a contract basis. I've done stuff for Volkswagen, 10 years probably. Still shows and events, supervising, and it's so easy for me, and and it gives me a little jingle, because I'm still a car guy.
You got to stay busy too.
Yeah, you got to stay busy. I mean, I still work like 3 days a week at Home Depot in the morning just to. Yeah. I tell people if I go to the gym for an hour, the 45 minutes I'm looking at things I probably shouldn't be looking at on the treadmill or some other exercise device. If I go to Home Depot for 4 hours, they pay me, and I walk 6 miles, Heiston lumber and all that kind of stuff. So, and the other thing, I'm with people that aren't my age. I'm with people that are 19 and 25 and 30. So there's a lot of different perspectives that I'm seeing of how people look at life, or where their challenges are, which most people that are in the age category I'm in don't have the advantage of. So they kind of get stagnant in that. So I don't have that. Very active in the VFW. I do a lot of honor guard stuff. We have a national cemetery here, so we have one day a month that we're dedicated at the National Cemetery for honor guard. And then I just last year found all the links to be in the Sons of the American Revolution. Mm-hmm. So I'm in the color guard for that as well. So I'm busy. I'm busy. And
I was at a neighbor's funeral at the National Cemetery in Sarasota and watched the VFW people work, and it was very impressive.
It's I buried, I don't know, over 300 guys, and it's still moving. I mean,
Yes. Yeah.
It's a great thing. I mean, it's
And it's also scary, of course, being in Florida, to see that cemetery fill up so quickly.
yeah.
It's only been a few years. So,
Well,
yeah.
I mean, all the World War II guys are gone.
Yeah.
There's a handful left. I mean, a lot of the Korean guys, and unfortunately, over half the Vietnam guys.
Yeah.
So, but I'm still very active in the car side of life. I have a couple of Model A's. I've got a 31 two-door that I'm working on right now. I'm going to give it to the kid across the street. He started to come over and sit in them when he was 10, so he's 17.
Nice.
And he's been going to Model A stuff with me for 7 years. Yeah, my grandson's a year old, so he's kind of always been like a surrogate grandson. Good kid. And then I've got a 30 Roadster I'm working on, and then I've got a 65 El Camino.
Nice.
I call it my therapy car. I don't care if it's ever done, because some days I just go and sit in it and move a wire or two. I could probably finish it in 2 weeks if I put my mind to it, but then I'd have to buy another one. So
Right. Cool.
So that's going on. But, yeah.
Well, it's just a terrific story, Arsey. I appreciate your time very much, and I appreciate your service and to the country and the company and to this podcast.
Yeah.
I can't thank you enough. And I hope everybody enjoys it. I'm sure they will. It's been very educational and a lot of fun.
Yeah, it's great. I mean, it was a great run. I mean, I wouldn't have missed it for the world. I learned so much. I mean, I had the opportunity to do things that that mere mortals should have probably never done around cars and people, and my whole career with Chrysler as well. I mean, it's been a really, I have no regrets. But I told my kids when they were just starting out, I said, the key is when an opportunity comes up, just say yes.
Yeah. Good advice.
Just say yes. Because, I mean, there's been 25 times in my life that I could have said, I don't know, maybe next time. And I'd have missed so much.
Yeah.
I'd have just missed so much. So, but I do have one thing. I know there was something about charities and that kind of stuff. I don't know if any real car guys are out there. One of the things I'm doing with this 31 is I started a GoFundMe because I want to give this car to the kid across the street. But I don't want to give it to him from me. I want to give him from the classic car and the old car community, because so many people, I go to car shows and people say, well, don't touch. And after a while, if I'm not going to touch, I'm not going to look. And there's just these cars, if some of these young people don't get in them soon, they're gone.
Yeah.
I mean, I see more cars for sale than anything. And I see in the Model A community, I see cars for sale, and then I see rolling chassis for sale the next week, because all the 32s and all the bodies are gone. So guys are buying a really nice classic car, taking the body, putting it on a Roadster frame, which I'm okay with. I mean, but some of the good stuff has to stay as well. So
if you get me that GoFundMe,
so if anybody's
listing,
interested,
I'll post it.
I mean, but we got to start finding a way to get decent cars, not great cars, not a 100-point car, but a good running car, because it's amazing. Zach and I had the car at the 4th of July parade. And after the parade in the marshalling area, he's also in the marching band, but he drove the car instead. I had 5 high school kids interested around the Model A, getting in and out of the seats, and I don't know. And I haven't seen that since the 60s.
Yeah.
So no matter what it is, if you've got a kid that's interested, grab him by the hand and get him involved. It's just a car, whether it's a Saab or a Model A or a Tri-5 or Mustang, whatever, because you can't take it with you. You know? And if we don't get them moved on, it's going to die. So, but
on that note, I think that's a good way to bring it to a close. And like I said, we'll put that GoFundMe there at the end of the podcast for sure.
All right, that'd be great. I appreciate that, John.
Arsey, thank you so much for your time.
All right, you're welcome. Nice talking to you.
Memories fade and stories get embellished with time. The views, information, and opinions expressed on this podcast are solely those of the individuals involved and do not necessarily represent those of the Saab and the Rearview Mirror podcast, its producers, or affiliated organizations. This podcast is for informational and entertainment purposes only and should not be considered as professional advice. Under no circumstances shall we be liable for any losses or damages resulting from the use of this information.